Greetings, ladies and mental gents, and welcome to the spooky marathon of 200 of the scariest stories from the subreddit ShortScaryStories. This is not my normal genre of narration. Normally, I either do fantasy or sci-fi, but I saw this subreddit and thought that doing a marathon-length video of super short stories would be ironic and funny, and possibly enjoyable. One of the rules on the subreddit is that no story is allowed to be longer than 500 words. For those who are new here, I hope that you will stick around and have a look at some of my other content. And for those of you who are old hands at this, do not worry, my content is not changing. We will be back to normal programming just after this. But in the meantime, I hope that you all enjoy. And if you do, please consider subscribing. Please note that the links to the original stories will be down below in the pinned comment. And now, I hope you're ready to get your spook on in 3, 2, 1. Story number 1. I was never allowed to go into my basement as a child. I now know why. Written by Stricker the Gecko. Mom, why can't I go into the basement? That was the first thing I remember speaking. That phrase would repeat it throughout my childhood, and every time I asked, I got the same response. It's not safe down there, so you can't go down there. And that was that. Nothing more, nothing less. I accepted that theory in my younger years. I didn't think it was very unusual at the time. I wasn't a very outgoing child, and many things scared me, so I had no desire to go down there when I was younger. I only ever got suspicion of what was down in the basement until I was 13. I still remember that night vividly. It was a rather normal night. I was reading my book in my bed and listening to some music. Usually, my mom would enter my room at about 9:30 and would tell me to go to sleep. But that didn't mean that I did. Well, that night I was reading, and I realized it was 10:15. And my mother hadn't told me to go to sleep. That didn't stop me from reading for about another 15 minutes or so. My mother entered my room. "Hey, bud, it's time to go to bed, and no leaving your room tonight." Last night I had left my bed to eat a snack, and my mother still believes that I was trying to sneak out. "Okay, Mom," I simply reply, and as I turned out the lights. "Good night, bud," my mother said as she closed the door. I had trouble falling asleep. I don't know why, but I didn't feel all that sleepy, but I soon lost all hope of sleep when I began to hear muffled screams coming from my basement. After a couple of minutes, I decided to leave the room. When I left, I realized that the basement door was open. It disturbed me so much that I ran back into my room and stayed there for the rest of the night. The next morning, I questioned my mother, but she denied everything and chalked everything up to nightmares. So, that day, while my mother was at work, I picked the lock of the basement door with a paperclip and a pair of pliers. When I walked down the stairs, I found a tall creature, with its disfigured face scratching at the walls. I quickly ran upstairs and locked the door. A month later, my mother committed suicide, and the police searched the house. They opened the basement door and found several bodies, the most recent of which was a tall man whose face had been bashed. End of story. Story number 2. Where Monsters Hide, written by Provider92. "There's a monster under my bed," she said, "and it stares that it wants us dead, all dead. It wants more friends living under the bed. What an imagination she's got in her head to conjure the creatures full of such dread. Perhaps it's just a dog that just wants to be fed. There's no monster under the bed," he said. "They only exist in your head instead. Why would you monster live under your bed?" He uttered the words and checked under the bed, found nothing, and sauntered off to lay down his head. But for the rest he wanted, he got not a shred. Dreadful dreams in darkness and red, creeping close to his daughter, crawling up her head, uncaring, unyielding, unmoving as he pled. Awoke with a startle and feeling misled, he calmed himself and pulled apart the thread. A harrowing vision that he'd hoped had misread. A rush to her door, through the frame he sped, into the room tinted with crimson red, to find a note scribbled and left on the bed. The monsters are just in my head, he said, but still says that it wants us dead, all dead, unless I use the scissors to cut at my head. End of story. Story number 3. Bathroom Window, written by Dorothy of Oz. It's one of the worst places to be put a window, in the bathroom. Now, you might be wondering why that might be. There are windows in bathrooms all the time, aren't there? But you see, in my bathroom, our shower and bathtub are combined, and our wonderful window sits right there in that space, above the bathtub and under the shower. Now, if the window was frosted glass, there wouldn't be a problem. But our window is as clear as they could be. Basically, just a normal window. And since we couldn't put a curtain over it, because shower, water, my parents settled on a sticker that simulated the effects of a frosted glass. But still, there were those tiny slivers of clear glass on the edges that you could see through, and the fact that the window faced the parking lot of another apartment building did not help at all. Growing up, that window was something that haunted my nightmares. I suppose it didn't help that I had a morbid fascination with horror stories, even though I couldn't sleep for days after reading one. I used the showers as quickly as I could, imagining a tall, dark figure pressing its face against the window pane, or a decrepit old woman banging on the glass, or a gross old man living in the apartment building, peering through the slivers of clear glass. Of course, I tried to calm myself after such imaginations. A tiny sliver of clear glass couldn't show anything. The window was 14 stories above the ground, so unless they were climbing master, our bathroom was unreachable from the outside. And besides, even if the mystery creature was a climber, the window would barely fit a child through it. The monster in my imagination wouldn't be able to fit into any tiny space. And besides, there were plenty of other, bigger windows in my apartment to worry about. Time passed, but that window never left my mind. I think it was the fact that I had nothing to do as I shampooed besides and stare out the window into the darkness beyond the sticker and imagined twisted tales to entertain myself. As I grew up and I realized that monsters weren't real, I comforted myself with the idea that anything threatening me through that window was impossible. If my twiggy little body can't get through that space, what can? You know? Now, I can't help but scoff at my younger self's fears. I sit in the bathtub staring at the locked door and listening to the gurgling screams of my mother and the raging bellows of the man who broke into my home. My mind is again filled with thoughts of that bathroom window. A window too small to fit through, and 14 floors above the ground. End of story. Story number 4. Would you survive against a murderer? Take this quiz and find out. Written by I Love C9 Calento. Question number 1. Lying awake in bed, you notice what seems to be footsteps approaching your door. Your reaction is to A. Immediately make a call to your loved ones and or the police department. B. Lie as still as possible, listening for any further movements. C. Quietly inspect your surroundings and take stock of potentially noisy areas. Question number 2. The footsteps come to a stop, replaced by the metallic sounds of your doorknob. Your next action is to A. Run into the kitchen and grab a knife. B. Search through the nearby toolbox for a lightweight crowbar. C. Retrieve the gun under your pillow and quietly hide in your closet. Question number 3. Your door opens with a bang, and you're certain there's someone in the adjacent room. You, A. Attempt to flee to a different, further room. B. Listen carefully to the footsteps, planning to escape through the front door. Or C. Lie quietly in wait, armed, in your preferred hiding spot. Question number 4. Based on your knowledge of your home's layout, in the mere seconds the intruder will almost certainly be upon you. You choose A. To upvote one last cat photo in what may be your final moments. B. Make the mad dash for the exit, potentially aided by your chosen weapon. C. Ensure your weapon is ready and mentally prepare for a fight. Results. If your answers were mostly A, Sorry, it looks like you wouldn't make it. That's okay. The average person wouldn't be able to ward off a dedicated murderer anyway. Why don't you reconsider some of your answers to make out the quiz again? Mostly B. So close. You're pretty savvy and more cautious than average, but you failed just short of survival. Mostly C. Wow, you're a smart cookie. Your murderer would probably be impressed and dismayed by your strong decision-making. Leave a comment to let everyone else know that you are a smart cream of the crop. End of story. Story number 5. A Helpful Neighbor, written by Real Science 87. I heard a knock and opened the door, and there stood Robbie, my neighbor. Not cute, but not ugly, plain-faced Robbie. He often came over to help me with things, fixing the faucet or changing the light fixture. He once helped me remodel my bathroom, and after the home invasion, he changed the locks on my doors for me. Sometimes he even mowed my lawn, just to be nice. He seemed like the kind of guy my father would be happy that his single daughter lived next to. He was sweating and smiling at me excitedly. I slammed the closet door and ran. End of story. Story number 6. The Nightlight, written by author Scott Clark. The damn Nightlight. Who thought it was a good idea, huh? Oh, that's right. She did. There's a reason I got rid of it in the first one. What if I need to drink in the middle of the night? What if our child needs to go to the bathroom? Valid reasons, I gave her that, but valid in normal houses. Not this one. I'll take my chances. You want to see to walk down the hallway? Fine. Don't get mad when the kid runs screaming into our bedroom at 3 a.m. because someone scared him. I don't need to see in that hallway. I know what's there. I've seen it. I don't want to see it again. That's why I got rid of the Nightlight. End of story. Story number 7. Bullied teen survives dungeon of torture, written by EXE. An unlikely hero emerges after a horror-filled month in a dungeon of the most prolific serial killer in history, saving self and classmates who used to bully her. Tonight, Nancy Johnson recounts her nightmarish month in the dungeon of David Grace, serial killer responsible for hundreds of murders, taken with her entire senior class when Grace hijacked their bus. Miss Johnson was locked in a cage and forced to watch as she would take the classmate out each day and torture them for hours before killing them with a hammer. When the police burst in, finding 27 horribly mutilated bodies in various stages of decomposition, Miss Johnson had already overpowered him and set him on fire, getting him and ending his 4-year terror-filled reign of news. Police described the methods he used of torture to the teenagers as uncharacteristically cruel. Even bore Grace. Only other survivor Laura Lance is catatonic from brain damage from a lobotomy attempted that was cut short by Miss Johnson overpowering David Grace. Formerly bullied Miss Johnson credits her faith in God for her will to survive. There's not much to say, just my faith in going on for it when I had an opportunity. Going forward, I hope I can inspire others to do the same. Never give up, no matter what the circumstances. Where are they now? 10 years after surviving the serial killer ordeal, Nancy Johnson graduates from medical school. Dr. Nancy Johnson touring war-torn areas of Africa to help the poor and sick. Laura Lance dies at age 25 in a catatonic state after barely surviving David Grace's dungeon of horrors. Not a headline. No one was there when her dying breath Laura Lance whispered her first sentence in 25 years. She got him on the first day. End of story. Story number 8. Do Not Call for Help, written by Limitless. I've been stranded for 103 days. I keep count by etching numbers into a sign I found, a sign that reads, Do Not Call for Help. I thought it was a cynical joke when I first read it. Some rich jerk buys an island and waits for somebody to get stranded. So I call for help. I tried every method I could think of, and eventually I realized getting a freaking signal. I wasted 2 days because I didn't think to check my damned phone. When I contacted the authorities, they said they'd managed to trace me down, and a ship would be sent my way in 6 hours. Sure enough, later that day I saw it, a not-so-fancy boat coming my way. Hooray! That was until I saw the light. It was dim at first, but as the boat got closer to the island, I came to realize that it was catching fire. The boat never made it to the coast. 8 lives were lost, they told me. I contacted them again after witnessing that, and the same scenario. Boat comes, boat catches flames, lives ended, and I'm still fricking stranded. I refuse to call for any help again. I don't want to risk not being insane in coincidence. Please, for your own sake, don't track me down. I'm happier alone than lives lost due to me. End of story. Story number 9. Aita for loving my girlfriend as much as I do. Written by Garrett is awkward. I've known my girlfriend for over 2 years now. I love and care for this woman with all of my heart, and I know she feels the same. I try to make my girlfriend feel safe as possible every single day. I make sure she gets home safe every day. If there's something in her life that is giving her issues, I deal with it accordingly. That boss that she hates hasn't shown up for work in a couple days. That guy she was talking to in the nightclub hasn't called her back yet. I know she isn't cheating on me. I love my girlfriend, and I can't wait to finally meet her. End of story. Story number 10. The Chicken Had Gone Bad. Written by R. I know what I did was wrong. I could even go to jail for it. But it wasn't my fault. The chicken had gone bad. Being a single mom isn't easy. Anybody will tell you that. Every day is the same. Dress the kids, feed the kids, drive the kids to school, go to work, get yelled at, ward off the advances of Jerry in the next cubicle, bring home barely enough money to feed everyone, pick up the kids, pay the babysitter, feed the kids, entertain them, feed the kids, put them to bed. And through all of that, every day you have to solve everyone's problems. Alan forgot his homework, Annie won't wash the dishes again. But who's there to help me with my problems, huh? When my kids slip up, I'm there to pick up their pieces. But when I step up, oh no, that's all my fault. I've just ruined everything. Poor old Mom's going crazy again. So I have to pick up after everyone, even myself. I have to clean up the litter box when Sam won't. I have to sweep up the broken plates. And, of course, I am the one who has to figure out what to cook when the chicken goes bad. I tell you, stress can do some crazy things. I thought maybe I can cook it anyways. It looks a little gray, but maybe the bacteria will cook off. But when I opened it up the package and got a whiff of it, I knew the kids wouldn't touch it. Kids are so picky. There is so much happening all at once as I sat there in the kitchen, racking my brains and trying to think of something to cook. The fire alarm went off. One of them must have been playing with the matches. That, of course, woke up the baby, and the baby starts crying. Like a good mom I am, I pick up the pieces, opened the window, fanned the smoke, and put the matches back on top of the cupboard, and went to quiet the baby. I am not proud of what I did. It was a band-aid when stitches were needed. Hell, it caused more problems than solutions. But it worked. The kids are all in the TV room now. All the bed is full and delicious dinner I made. I am a good mom. I do the best I can, but sometimes even the best players have to cheat a little. I don't know what I'll say when people ask. It'll be nice not to have to pay the babysitter anymore. Their kids will be wondering where the baby brother is, though. What will I say? I just want to go lie down now. Maybe I'll put the kids to bed early tonight, and I'll clean up tomorrow. I can come up with a story tomorrow. For now, I think I've earned some sleep. End of story. Story number 11. Zombies. Written by Reckless Rev 1125. We decided to hide in an abandoned housing project, and we'd set up a small camp on one of the upper floors. Claire would go to the roof with a telescope she'd found in one of the apartments and return with the reports of the front lines. The army had mounted a rescue offensive and were pushing into the city. "How does it look?" I asked. She shook her head. "Terrible. It's a slaughter. We're not going to make it." Gobert sighed. "How bad?" "We're just overwhelmed. There's hundreds, thousands, and worse, they really seem to enjoy killing. Some of them are covered in blood and gore, and I think they might actually be laughing." "What do we do?" Emma asked. "Do we stay here? Do we run?" "We can't," Gobert said. "We'd never make it. We're just not fast enough with Steve's hurt leg." I felt embarrassed. It didn't hurt anymore, but he was right. I wasn't fast. "Let's go to the front lines," Tex said. "Help out." "Us?" Cabot asked with surprise. "Help out?" "Yeah," Tex insisted. "Every little bit counts." "No," Cabot said. "We stay." "I think we should go," Tex said. "No," Cabot repeated. "We stay." "Who elected you leader?" Tex asked. Cabot raised a pointed finger. "I've just had it about enough with you," he said. "Get your finger out of my face," Tex demanded. Gobert ignored him and continued to point. "You want to get to the front lines, go, but we're staying here." "Get your finger out of my face," Tex said again. Gobert still pointed. "You think that's some kind of soldier, do you? Then go. We won't miss you." "I told you," Tex said, "to get your finger out of my face." He swatted at Cabot's hand. There was a sickening, crunching, tearing sound, and Cabot's arm separated at the elbow and dropped to the floor. Cabot stood there for a moment in shock, staring at his lost limb. All of us stared. An uncomfortable quiet ensued. "Hey," Tex offered finally, quite apologetic. "I'm really sorry, dude." Cabot bent down and picked up an arm by the wrist. "God damn it," he hissed angrily. He examined the end for a moment, but knew that there was no reattaching it. "I can't fricking believe this." He threw the arm into the nearby trash bin. "Being a zombie sucks," he announced to no one in particular, a single green tear rolling down his rotting cheek. There was a tense, uncomfortable agreement. It did suck to be a zombie, and we were not only relatively new at it, we were simply not very good zombies. It wouldn't be long before my leg dropped off like Cobert's arms, and I had only been dead a week. The gunshots seemed closer now. We knew that we had no chance when the living finally came for us. End of story. Story number 12. It's a Horrible Life, written by Spooky Scary. When I approached you in the park, you looked pretty down and out. Clothes disheveled, eyes bloodshot, nose running. The holidays can be hard on people. I sit next to you on the bench. I smell the binge drinking invading my nostrils. "How are you doing, friend?" I asked gently. "Not so good," you reply. "I got fired from my job. Can you believe that? Fired so close to Christmas. My girlfriend keeps saying that we're going to get evicted if I don't find something soon. Doesn't she think that I know that? I reached out to my friends, but none of them will help me because I've asked so many times before. You know, sometimes I think everyone would be better off if I were never born." You look shocked, as if you can't believe you've unloaded so much to a total stranger. I am familiar with this effect I have on people. "Now, I'm sure that's not true," I say. "Listen, you might not believe this, but I'm an angel sent from heaven to watch over people like you. Why don't I show you what it would be like if you were never born? Then you can see how much everyone needs you." You snuffle. "Okay." I produce a tiny bulb from my pocket and ring it. Suddenly, we're in front of a magnificent mansion. "Where are we?" you ask. "I took you to your girlfriend's. Let's see how sad she is without you." We peek into the window and an impressive interior with an expensive furnishings. Your girlfriend is at the dinner table with an exceedingly handsome man holding his hand. She laughs at something he says and strokes the hair of a beautiful child sitting next to her. But she's better off without me," you exclaim, horrified. "Oh, I'm so sorry," I say. "Let's try someone else." I ring my bell, and we're at your parents' house. A young man who bears a resemblance to you walks outside. Is that my brother? I can't be. He died years ago. If I had to guess, I offer, he may be alive because you weren't around to influence him to drive so fast. I watch your face as your parents come out of the house, smiling and hugging your brother in a way that they never hugged you. Oh, God, you say, take me back, please. I can't stand another second here. I ring the bell, and we're back in a world that you know is worse because of your existence. You run away, and I wonder how you're going to do it. Pills, a gun, or maybe jumping off a tall building. I know that you won't be able to live with what I've shown you. No one has ever been able to. None of it was real, of course, but you think it is, and that's enough. I remove my hat and give my horn some air and keep walking, looking for the next poor soul depressed during this fine holiday season. End of story. Story number 13. Your husband and daughter are here. Written by closing time __. I was running late for work and I didn't have time to take my daughter, Emily, to school. Luckily, it was my husband's day off and he offered to give her a ride. I kissed them goodbye and told them that I would see them later. My work was pretty uneventful and slow, to be honest. Around lunchtime, my manager, Catherine, came to see me and advised me that my husband and daughter were here. I was surprised, to say the least. What was Greg thinking? A morgue is no place for a child. I look at Catherine to see tears forming in her eyes. There's been an accident. End of story. Story number 14. Halloween 2017. In a small town, you get to know everyone. Written by Pope Hat Skeleton. 23 kids, no more. That was the plan. It was my therapist's suggestion that I give out candy this Halloween, and I'd been making such progress it sounded like a good idea. I moved to a quiet hamlet at her recommendation. After all, the familiarity of a small town should help me with the paranoia, and it has until tonight. I never understood Halloween, a night when masked strangers can stroll up to your doorstep wielding knives and axes, and your neighborly duty is to open up and present yourself. Might as well stamp a bullseye on your chest. But the doctor said there was normal people do, so I figured I'd give it a try. 23 kids, 16 teenagers, and 70 adults in this town. All memorized my name and address, none of them psychopaths, by my reckoning, so I could tolerate the masks long enough to answer the door. Adults don't need candy, teens could be turned away, and I had to hand out 23 sweets, max, and then I could lock up and be done with it. Then child number 24 knocked on my door. I'd already thrown the rest of the candy away. I grabbed a half-eaten bag of pretzels from the pantry and shoved it in a pail and slammed the door. Since then, 2 more have come onto my porch. I didn't answer. The town's barely on the map. No reason to come here just to trick-or-treat. No one has a family visiting. I would have catalogued it. No double-dippers. I'd noticed the same costume twice. There are people out there that shouldn't be. I've already opened the door to some of them. They know that I'm here. They know that I'm alone. Only 2 cops in the whole town, and they're all parking at the festival. My car is in the drive. If they're waiting in the yard for me to make my break for it, they'll get me for sure. I didn't watch them all leave. Idiot. Deadbolt would hold, but I can't watch all the windows. I have a bat under the bed. I have knives in the kitchen. I have a rope in the garage. They won't get me. Sam surveyed her role and congratulated herself on her cleverness. She figured out how to fill a Halloween pail in a village with only a few dozen houses. Throw a bedsheet on top of a werewolf costume, wear a goblin mask over your zombie makeup, double the customers, double the prices, as long as the adults didn't catch on. Her classmates all reported that the ploy had worked wonderfully, except on the house on Maple, which had stopped giving candy halfway through the night. Sam was peeking through the windows when no one answered on her second go-around. She saw a strange decoration in the garage, but why would someone hang something like that when no one can see it? Then again, that guy had always been odd. End of story. Story number 15. Emails. Written by Johnny Hotshot. Ask anyone who works in law enforcement and they'll be able to tell you that our case stands out above all others. Maybe they had to resort to something they never thought that they would do. Maybe they had doubts about how it turned out. Or maybe it was just never solved at all. After 38 years in the Special Crimes Unit, I know what my case is. The case number was 89-1-00316-5. And don't ask me how long it took me before I knew the number by heart. 19 kids who all went missing over the course of 2 years. The public was scared, and for good reason. I can still remember some of the news reports about keeping yourself and your children safe at night. The worst part about this case, the part that is burned into my memory, were the emails. About a week after the first kidnapping, the police station received a strange email from a throwaway email address. There was no subject or text, just a single video. The poor secretary, her first saw it, gave off a blood-curdling scream, the kind that shakes it deep down to the core. It was the missing child, bloody and tortured. Once the video had been sent to my department for analysis, we were able to determine that the child was still alive, but not much else. The video of the room was too dark and poor quality to distinguish the location, and the sick bastard who was recording it never spoke or showed their face. This became a trademark of this case. Each kidnapping would be followed by an email from a new throwaway address containing a video of the victim. Sometimes you could see the child from the previous video, meaning the kids were not being killed. I wouldn't be too happy, because from what we could tell by the videos, death might have been a release from this fresh hell that they were trapped in. 19 videos of torture kids later, the department finally had enough evidence to make an arrest. An old loner named Paul Schneider was the guy we took in. Despite the poor quality, frames from the videos were matched up fairly well to the areas in his basement. Tools that had forensics teams said would be used in the inflicting of wounds on children in the videos were also found. And Paul had no alibi, as he lived alone with no job or family to occupy him. He was sentenced to life in prison, and once he got locked away and kidnappings ended and the emails stopped. They never found the bodies, though, and he denies it to this day. I bring up case 89-1-00316-5 today, long after my retirement, because today I received a new email. It had attached an image of 19 dirty, bloody, and weak-looking men and women that were chained up in a dingy concrete room with a message scrawled in red on the floor. Wrong man. End of story. Story number 16. Washington, Oregon, 1974. Written by Boysenberry. I hate my hair. It's so plain and boring, mousy brown and poker straight. The only thing that it has going for it is length, which is midway down my back. Still, it is impossible to put in any other style other than one I've been sporting since I was 12. Loose and parted in the middle. Plain hair framing a plain face, which is why on a Friday evening I'm sitting cross-legged on my bed, listening to Stevie Wonder records and idly running a brush through my hair. Instead, I'm on a date like my dorm mate Rachel, who is blonde and bosomy. Sighing and tossing the brush aside, I pull on my cardigan and go out for a walk along the campus. Outdoors is dusky and tepid, and the gentle breeze lifting the strands of hair I so loathe. My head head down as I walk to avoid anyone I might know. I'm just not in the mood for any interaction. And that's when I bump into him. I can hear a thump of the books falling on the ground. Immediately, I bend down to retrieve them. Apologies tumbling from my lips. I'm so sorry, Wow, he's good looking, really good looking. Unlike the boys I've seen around here. Thick, dark hair, great bone structure. So well dressed, and his arm is in a sling. Oh my God! Now I really feel bad. It's okay, don't worry about it, it's fine. His voice is smooth and deep, and with a faint accent I can't quite place. I'm the one who thought that I could carry all these books just from one arm. I don't realize that I'm still holding onto the books until he reaches for them. Here, let me. I'm not sure where this boldness comes from, as I don't socialize with boys all that much. But despite him being the best-looking guy I've ever seen, my ability to talk is easy as breathing. Where are you headed? I can carry these for you if you like, so you don't drop them again. His smile is knee-weakening. I will like that very much. I'm just heading to my car, he says, jerking his head in the direction of the parking lot. On the way there, he compliments my hair. I respond by blushing and dropping my head so it falls on my face like a curtain, telling him how much I hate it. Well, I think it's just lovely, and I believe him. We reach his Volkswagen Beetle, still feeling bold as I watch him unlock his car. I say, I'm Sabina, by the way. What's your name? Theodore. He opens the door and turns to look at me, this time a smile accompanied by an odd hardness in his eyes. But you can call me Ted. End of story. Story number 17. Intelligent Design, written by Buzzo 2020. The doctor slowly, almost cautiously approached the last petri dish and stared down at the embryo inside, gesturing towards it as if it was a priceless treasure. Now this one, he began, in a quite special, it's a boy, and he's almost guaranteed to be born with microcephaly, an extremely rare disease, more commonly known as pinhead disease. A cruel term, to be sure, but most accurate. It would likely cause dwarfism and severe intellectual impairment, so total commitment on your part would be required to ensure him the best quality of life. The mother came closer and bent down to peer at the embryo. She caressed the air above it like she was comforting it. She cooed at her helplessness. You'll need a lot of love, won't he, Doctor? More than other babies. Indeed, he will. To be frank with you, your life will not be your own. The child will need your complete and utter devotion. But this can be very rewarding for some parents. Fatal disease for emotional fulfillment. Her lips trembled and her eyes welled up as she looked at her husband pleadingly. He needs us, honey. Her husband pursed his lips. How long do they usually live? He asked the doctor. It's hard to say. It depends on the number of factors, but they generally expire by early adulthood. The husband looked at his wife and sighed. It will be a lot of work, honey, and remember, you want more kids eventually. Will we be able to manage? She looked down at the embryo and choked back her sobs. The doctor interjected. If I may, this doesn't necessarily preclude having more children. ViceCorp is always in need of raw materials for the robotics program, and they pay quite handsomely. If, after a few years, you find the child is too much to bear, there is no shame in... The husband interrupted the doctor, bristling with the implications. Doctor, my wife and I do not agree at using human beings as batteries. It is against our beliefs. That's certainly understandable. Well, what can I do is preset all life functions to cease at approximately 5 years. There would be no pain. The child should just not wake up one morning. That way we can experience the delicate love that only such a child can bring, and still be able to have more children in the future, without sacrificing everything. This would only cost another $20,000. The couple smiled at each other. The husband turned back to the doctor. Okay then, doctor. I think we'll go with the pinhead. His wife squealed with glee. Happy wife, happy life, right? The doctor cleared his throat. Then it's agreed. We'll bump up the odds of microcephaly and 100% and set a kill switch for 5 years. The husband looked at his wife. Let's make it 10, doctor. His wife burst into tears. She threw her arms around her husband and buried her face in his chest, sobbing with an ecstatic fervor of impeding motherhood. End of story. Story number 18. Vowed You, written by Indiana Bones 8. I read a text again. "Come over now," it said, with an address. I glanced at my wife. She was already asleep. I never thought that someday I'd become a cheater. I loved my wife, but somewhere along the way we grew distant. Serena was a breath of fresh air in so many ways. She was so impulsive, so vivacious, and so full of life. She also was married, just like me. She'd grown apart from her spouse. Worse than that, her husband had severe anger issues. She had said that she was terrified of him more than once. I know that this is wrong, and I've been trying to stop. "Hurry, I'm waiting," she texted. Reluctantly, I got dressed. I'm going to end this, but she deserves to hear it in person. I noticed she picked a place much farther out than our usual motel. She's well known in town, so it makes sense that this was even further out than usual. I decided to look it up on my phone, and it wasn't a motel at all. It was a cabin, alone in the woods. "Did you rent a cabin? You know I have to be back home tonight," I texted. She didn't give me an answer, and she just texted back, "The door is open, and I'll be inside." After fighting with myself internally, I ended up taking the coward's way out. I sent her a long text message that I couldn't do this anymore, and turned my car around and drove back home. The next morning, I heard my wife get ready for work to leave at 5 a.m. I work from home, so I didn't get out of bed, but I turned on the TV. There was a story about a horrible murder last night, and I audibly gasped as I saw Serena's face flash onto the screen. My fingers trembled as I turned up the volume. The reporter stated that she was severely beaten and her body was found over 24 stab wounds. I began to weep, believing that this was my fault. She left the door open for me. I never came, and some psycho came in and killed her. I cried. Downstairs, I heard the front door slam open loudly. I assumed my wife had forgotten something and came back home. I could hear the footsteps coming up the stairs. The reporter continued that due to the condition of the body, they suspected she'd been murdered a week ago. I shook my head, checking my phone. She was texting me last night. How could she have been dead a week ago? Just then, a new text popped up from Serena's number. "Found you," it said. The footsteps were getting closer, and the bedroom door. "Honey, is that you?" I called out to no answer. The footsteps got closer. "Honey?" I called out one last time, and the bedroom door swung open. End of story. Story number 19. Hi, hungry. I'm Dad. Written by Lovely Days. Tom sat in the hard wooden staircase watching the front door, waiting. He really had to leave, but right as he was about to go, an amazing joke hit him, and he couldn't keep it to himself. Since his daughters were due to come meandering through the door at any moment, he decided that postponing for a few minutes couldn't cause any harm. His daughters usually rolled their eyes and let their exacerbated sighs when he delivered his comedy masterpieces, but they just still smiled. He was never sure if the smiles were because of his unsurpassed hilarity, or if they were just laughing at his lame attempts at humor. Either way, nothing brightens his day more than seeing his girls with smiles adorning their beautiful faces. That was why he was delaying his departure. He had a dad joke to end all dad jokes, and he hoped it would eventually bring a smile to their faces. The doorknob began to turn. Finally! Tom rose, hovering above the crumpled, lifeless body as the girls entered the house. "Girls, watch out for the top step," he chuckled. "It's a real killer." After delivering the witty gem, he stopped resisting and relaxed as he was pulled into the light. End of story. Story number 20. Big Spoon, written by Not a Blender. A slight shift in the bed beside me tore me from my sleep. It was too dark to see, and I was too groggy to open my eyes. So my question, not that I even knew exactly what I was asking, came out more like a groan than a rose and pitch at the end. My husband seemed to understand what I meant. I could hear the smile in his voice as he quietly responded, "Just going to the bathroom, babe." Murmuring in a sleepy hum of acknowledgement, I snuggled deeper into my pillow. The memory foam melded perfectly with my face. I was still sleepy enough to fall asleep without the big spoon, but if I stayed awake too long, insomnia would kick in without his arms around me. For a moment, the only sounds were my own breathing and his footfalls on the carpet. A harsh light shone into the room just for a moment as he turned on the hall light, but he was considerate enough to quickly close the door to help me rest. A few minutes passed and I was still awake. I let out a harsh breath through my nose as I turned onto my left side and then back onto my right. Soon enough, the bedroom door opened and closed again. A small smile played across my face as my husband walked back towards the bed. I opened my eyes just a crack, warmth filling me at the sight of a familiar outline, however obscured by the darkness it was. He gingerly slipped into bed beside me, and we fit together like puzzle pieces. His blissful warmth, the grounding weight of my arm over my waist, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the soft kiss he pressed onto the back of my neck. It all helped slumber wash over me like a warm bath, and it made it all the more surprising to hear the knock from the bedroom door. "Babe, why is the door locked?" The arms around me tightened. End of story. Story number 21. Mom, Dad, I'm adopted. Written by Sam Marduk. Mom, Dad, I'm adopted. My parents ceased their activities. My mother, adorned in a pearl necklace and earrings to match, stood upright. Upon both hands she wore oven mitts and matching apron. Her teal sundress really did bring out her blue in her eyes. She closed the oven and removed the mitts, revealing perfectly manicured nails. My father sat his pipe on the end of the table and closed his book. His hair, in just a touch of grey, was immaculate as ever. He wore a plaid shirt and a soft tan cardigan. He removed his reading glasses and looked me in the face, almost in unison. "Why, dear, what makes you say that, son?" Before them I stood, pressed khaki pants, tucked-in button-down shirt, and my matching belt and shoes. I felt both at one with and detached from the people before me. No. I tried to sound confident, but at the time, my confidence was lost to pubescence. "Don't be ridiculous." My father stood up with a light and perfectly lit kitchen. He placed his hands on my shoulders and looked me in the eyes. "You're our boy, and we love you." I studied the lines on his face, seeking, no, pleading for a lie. But there was none. "Sit, dear," my mother interjected, opening the stove. "Dinner is almost ready." I sat at the polished wooden table and placed my napkin on my lap, an old habit from etiquette school. I felt my eyes moistened. "Are you sure?" I was able to ask, staring at the blank place on my table where my food would soon be. My mother placed prepared plates before my father and I. He said a brief grace at the table and began eating the roast and potatoes my mother had so delicately prepared. "Positive," he said, savoring his bite and wiping his lips. My mother sat at last with her plate on the other side of the table, to my left, and I took my hand. "You're our baby," she said, looking me in the eye and assuring me that I was her offspring. "Now, let's talk about something else. You haven't said hello to our guest." My eyes and face were wet and red, and I stared across the table. The woman before me was tied to a chair. Ropes ran from her throat to her feet, keeping her from moving freely. Across her mouth was tightly wound duct tape, and her head was slumped forwards. The only appendage not tied down was her right arm. It was not a kindness extended, but rather unneeded. Her right arm was severed below the shoulder. Blood was still actively pouring from the poor bandaging and soaking her side-deep red. Her eyes were rolled back into her head in a loss of consciousness from the extreme pain that she had just endured. My parents shed a laugh over it being seasoned so well. I looked at all of this again and cried out in a whisper, "Please tell me I'm adopted." End of story. Story number 22. Say it like you mean it. Written by Eric Waana. I'm sorry. He's only a young boy, so I understand, but he's just not getting it yet. I tell my son to say it like he means it. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean it. Close, but not quite what I'm looking for. I need him to really feel it. I tell him, once again, to say it like he means it. Dad, I'm really sorry. Mum told me to clean up my toys, and I forgot about my car. I never meant for her to fall down the stairs, and I didn't mean for this to happen. I'm sorry. That's my boy. I tell him, good job, son. That's how you need to say it to the police when they come, and try to cry a bit more so that they think you're telling the truth. End of story. Story number 23. Wait, something's not right. Written by Morassi ID. A sound wakes you up. Sound like a knock on the front door. It's way past midnight. You're lying on the sofa with the TV on static. The house is dark. The lights are off. You're all alone. You look out the window. You see there's a full moon shining in light through the glass pane. You get up and you head towards the front door. You look through the peephole. No one outside. You open the door. Find no one. You check around the porch. Still no one. Maybe the kids were playing tricks on you. Annoyed, you shut the door, turn off the TV and close the window, and head upstairs to your bedroom for the night. End of story. Story number 24. Beauty Queen, written by Cappy Z. You've been selected. I'm so sorry, Jane. She remembered the call as if she had just received it, remembering the sense of abject terror and the knowledge that her fate was set. If only she had not been so beautiful. She remembered the old jokes from within her own lifetime. You notice that Earth always wins the Miss Universe contest. It's like the rest of the universe isn't even trying. Following first contact, we quickly learnt that the other worlds did not find it so funny. Earth had no choice but to submit. The Universal Alliance, the conglomeration of bizarre otherworldly species called themselves, were literal light years ahead. Their technology and weaponry were beyond what human beings could even comprehend, much less defend against. What the Alliance wanted, Earth was unable to refuse. They certainly hadn't been happy to learn that the Earth had been arrogantly proclaiming its own beauty queens, Miss Universe, for decades, taking it as a given that Earth people knew other civilizations existed. Everyone knew that. It was simple logic. They assumed that we'd done it deliberately, mocking them, thinking that they wouldn't notice. Worst of all, they thought it was actually a good idea. Jane lay in the darkened room, strapped to a steel table, waiting. She'd entered her local beauty pageant as a joke, despite her friends' warnings. It's not like I'll get past the first round, she insisted. There'll be girls much prettier than me. She admitted to herself, now that she'd done it to soothe her own ego, just to have a large group tell her how beautiful she was. Who wouldn't want that? Apparently more beautiful girls didn't want that. She won local, state, and nationals effortlessly. Then she was locked in. She tried to back out of Miss World, but the contract had been signed, and she had won that as well. For all intents and purposes, she was the most beautiful woman on Earth. Now it was time for the finals. The issue faced by the overlords of the Alliance was how to regulate the judged standards of beauty across the known universe. The sentient races of the cosmos came in all shapes and sizes. Some breathed air, some water, some had 5 limbs, some had 2, some had more than 1 head, and don't even ask about the various reproductive systems out there. Eventually, it was established that the finalists would be judged on what was common to them all. Every species had a central nervous system. For humans, a brain, a power source, a heart for humans, and a basic sensory tools, ears, eyes, fingers, and tongue. All participants would be reduced to those features in the interests of equality and fairness. Jane wept silently as the misshapen grey blob being hobbled into the room, wheeling before him a tray of sharpened, gleaming surgical tools. "All set," he intoned through the translating device. "Now, let's see how beautiful you really are." End of story. Story 25. Unfinished Business. Written by Urban Myth. There's a ghost in town, you know, and not one that is harmless ones either. She died of a broken heart over the loss of her daughter. If you're sensitive, you can see her walking the streets, screaming and rending her clothes. She says that she won't rest until she finds out who murdered her child. And she means it. The daughter's boyfriend thrown out of the window over and over. Her school rival face pressed against an iron. Her father, the ghost's husband, nearly drowned in a bathtub. She appears hurling accusations and hurts you until you confess. It usually doesn't take long, but she still doesn't move on. She realizes it's a lie, so she leaves and finds the next person on the list. Sometimes her screams become sobs. What if it was some wandering vagrant who left town weeks ago? Some serial killer who picked a random target they have no connection to? What if she never learns of who took her daughter away? I tried to tell her she does know who did it. I point to the note. I tell her over and over, no one killed me. I took my own life. You don't need to keep hurting people. It was all my fault. And she leans down and gently takes my skeletal face in her bony hands and shakes her head. Of course you didn't. I know my daughter. I always accepted you. I did everything I could to make you happy. You wouldn't do this. Someone faked the note. I know it. I was a good mum. You wouldn't have done this. I tried to explain over and over, but she's not listening. She suspects the local priest now. She'd never quite trusted him anyway. My guilt is no match for her rage, so all I can do is watch as she floats away. Shortly, I hear the screams from the church. There is a ghost in town, you know, and not one of the harmless ones either. And I am so sorry. End of story. Story number 26. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Written by Mod V. At first, I was scared, but then I started to enjoy it. What would you do if every morning you woke up with the same radio talk show about Trump's hair, the same rainy day, and the same old man tripping on the loose rug in the hall? That was still funny, even on the 12th repeat. You'd have some fun, right? Because that's all I could do after the hotel trapped me. The hotel everyone warned me not to go to. I should have known from the way the receptionist, but I digress. At first I was scared, confused, and most of all, lonely. I tried everything to break the curse. I went to sleep in another bed. I drove as far as I could. I even killed myself. But every morning I woke up here. Every morning was the 16th of July. I started having fun. At first I laughed openly at the old man who tripped, not worrying about the non-existent consequences, and continued my day in a similar fashion. Then I started going further, enjoying the freedom to do whatever I wanted. I've stolen cars, robbed stores. I don't mean to brag, but there aren't many women left in the town that I haven't managed to seduce. After a few attempts, of course. The world was my bitch, and I could do whatever I wanted, to whoever I wanted. The old man was always my first target, though, the first victim of the day to get me in the mood for some mischief. I saw what would happen if I knocked the tray out of his hands. He gave me a death stare. A week later, I punched him in the gut. A few weeks after that, I shoved him down the stairs. The sound of his bones crunching sent delightful shivers down my spine. Frick him and whatever he trapped me here. The day after that was different. When I opened the door, the man was not walking down the corridor, about to trip on the rug. He was standing at the end of the hall, staring at me. I rushed past him to see if I'd broken free, but everything else was still the same. The next day, he was still staring at me. Only this time, he was standing a little closer. I yelled at him and told him to frick off, and left. The next day, he was closer still. And closer. Until one repeat, I woke up with him standing in my room, staring at me. I started beating him, stabbing him, strangling him. anything to try and get him away. But every morning, he got a little closer. Every morning, his face got a little angrier. And now, here I am. I deserve this. Every day I awake to darkness. I can't breathe. There's a pillow over my face. I've lost count of how many times I've died and reawoken. I thrash and squirm and panic. But his strength is too much. End of story. Story number 27. We were hoping for a baby. Written by KJ Camps. Today, my partner and I went to apply for a license. We weren't quite ready, but we had heard rumors that they were raising the threshold of income for family permits in the next quarter, and we were only just breaking means as it was. We arrived at the office, stepping through the automatic doors. The automatic receptionist gave us each a number, and we called into separate offices. This wasn't unusual. They often split the sexes for interviews prior to granting family permits. "Good luck," I said to Jane with a smile, and she squeezed my hand twice, the way that she always did. "Mr. Cooper," the consul said, and I sat down with a small white office. "Take a seat. We will dispense the complimentary relaxant." I sat in the chair where the uplink to my wrist was flooded with the complimentary endorphins. I felt my anxiety instantly peel away. "Now, unfortunately, we have determined that your current finances are below the required minimum for a family status." "But I'm an electrician," I said calmly, the uplink doing its job. "I have a job." "Electricians are set for redundancy sometime later this year," the consul said in an even voice. "We are sorry, though. We do have some good news." "Oh?" I asked. A part of me was still reading from the news that I'd never have a family. A deep part of me, it screamed. "You have been selected for voluntary redundancy," his voice said. "Redundancy? No." Jane had always wanted a child, always dreamed of a family. "Your house and contents will account for 67% of your debt. However, as your blood type is AB negative, we are happy to offer you a prime-level subscription for both you and your wife's bodies. You total collateral accounts for 10 years in retirement program. Congratulations!" "Our bodies?" I asked calmly. Jane would be devastated. I had promised her a family on our wedding day. "Yes, you won't need them. This is very exciting. We are not often able to offer such a high-level subscription." "I don't want a subscription. I want my life." "I'm sorry, Mr. Cooper, but that is simply not feasible. Neither you nor your wife are considered essential services. Your voluntary redundancy has already been authorized. Just try and relax, and we'll upload you into the retirement program." "What? My wife Jane is just, Your wife has already uploaded, Mr. Cooper." Her voice was soft now, as if draining away. My sight was darkening too. "She's waiting for you on the other side." I felt it then, a shift, and only for a moment the jarring, violent pull of my mind from my body and into Today, my partner and I went to apply for a license. We weren't quite ready. But really, who is? Besides, the economy is doing great. I was up for a promotion, and my wife had just landed a job of her dreams. End of story. Story number 28. Driving at Night, written by Takaparoinen Maita. I've been working night shifts for a while now. When you drive alone on the empty roads at night, you start noticing things. Most of the time, you're alone on the road. Sometimes there's another car driving behind you, seeming to take the same turns every time. If you turn your blinker on, so do they, even if there's nowhere to turn. Sometimes the car is visible from the side mirrors, but if you look into your rearview mirror, you only see the road behind you. They are easy to evade, though. Just turn your signal on, it'll do the same, and then the next crossroads turn the other way. The car will always turn the way that it's signaling. Most of them aren't cars. Sometimes you see a deer crossing the road, but it has too many legs. Sometimes you see a man dressed in a construction worker standing on the side of the road at 3 a.m., alone, with no sign or roadwork being done anywhere around. Sometimes a large roadkill you just drove by simply gets up and walks away. it's best not to look or think too much about them. End of story. Story number 29. Why I Had to Quit My Job, written by Winter Tragedy. I worked in a shopping center in a big city. I would see so many people, endless faces day in and day out. They all became a blur, and a flash of voices merged together in my memory. Except for a few. Of course, there were your regulars that you interact with so often that they stand out of the crowd. Then there's the typical tantrum throwers, the heart warmers, the weirdos, and the crazies. But there was one more type. They didn't seem to fit into any category. They were just strange, and always left me feeling uneasy for the rest of the day. They always followed the same routine. They would browse carefully and inspect the products, sometimes for hours. If you greeted them, they would slowly turn their heads to you and flash you a strange, crooked smile, and then turn back to the shelves. They would browse the aisles from one side to another, never backtracking or skipping one. They moved so slowly, like gravity weighed more for them. Or maybe they were all just a ton of Xanax, but even that doesn't explain it. The strangest part was when they actually did buy something. Never more than one item at a time. I'd ask if they found everything all right, and sometimes they would look at me with just that stupid smile, eyes unblinking, not speaking. Sometimes they would stop smiling and lean a little closer to me, slowly and monotonously say, yes, and then move back and start smiling again. They would place $100 bill on the counter every time, and then look confused when I tried to give them change. Every time. After holding it for a moment and staring at it, would place it back on the counter, and then take their item and leave. At first, I tried to yell after them, but they never stopped. So I gave up. I didn't know why, but every time I was left with an empty, hollow feeling throughout my entire body. I couldn't seem to warm up for days, and my sleep would be broken. Actually, interacting with them left me exhausted and depressed. I quit when a man took his change with him. He looked at it confused, like how it always happened, but then he kept it in his hand. He took his item and left. It set something off inside me, seeing one of them deviate from the sick little strange game. I got a job in a factory with one co-worker and no customers in sight. But I still see them out there sometimes when I shop, browsing and smiling and bobbing their heads slightly, limbs swaying a bit too freely. I told my co-worker about it, and he thought I was nuts, until 2 weeks later, when we were on shift, and he says that he started paying attention to the shoppers around him, and he saw it too. End of story. Story number 30. I Pretend. Written by King Loki Lord. When I wish my wife good morning, I'm just pretending. When I thank her for making breakfast, I'm just pretending. When she sees me off to work, I'm just pretending. When I get a call from home to say how much I miss her, I'm just pretending. When I come home and eat dinner, I'm just pretending. When her parents call saying that they want to visit for the first time in years, I am just pretending. When the neighbors ask about how I'm doing since the accident, I have to pretend. When I draw the curtains to make sure that no one can see, I have to pretend. When my wife begins to smell, I have to pretend. When my wife begins to decompose, I have to pretend. When my wife wishes me good night, I have to pretend, because if I stop pretending, the creature moving her corpse might stop pretending too. End of story. Story number 31. Killer. Written by Cat Lady in Training. I was born to kill. Nobody ever hears me coming until it's too late. Then they scream. Scream and beg and hurt. But sadly, they never scream for long. Even the strongest stop fighting back at some point. That's why I sometimes pretend to be weaker than I really am. I let them flee, only to chase them over and over again. Oh, they never realize what is happening until they bleed out. I never really plan on getting. They just jump in my way. Today, I'm walking through the woods when I hear somebody shuffling through the leaves. I creep closer, hoping that it isn't just the wind blowing through the forest. Suddenly, I hear a snapping of a twig. I inch closer to see a fine specimen clad in dark brown colors. Completely unaware of my presence, just the way I like it. She is still young, but age and sex have never mattered to me. I just want to kill. I was born with a surge, so it's not my fault. I mean, some are born to be prey, and some are born to be predators. That's life. No good in trying to fight it. To be fair, I never really did try and fight my urge. I spare my family, but I have my reasons. It would be inconvenient, you see. They care for me, and people would notice if they disappeared. So I get my prey somewhere else. I'm cowering behind a bush, my whole body shaking with adrenaline. It's like a drug. She is distracted by something on the floor and slowly moves towards me. 2 more steps, and she finally is close enough. Without thinking, I jump. She is so surprised that she doesn't even scream. It's a shame. I can feel her warm body trembling underneath me. Within seconds, she has realized what has happened and starts to struggle. Her face is pressed into the dirt, so her screams come out muffled. She thrashes about violently, and she is no match for me. I rip through her brown coat and break her skin. The warm smell of blood enters my nose, making me shudder with anticipation. She is scared and in pain and completely helpless. Her blood fills my mouth, promising me more once I'm done. Today, I feel generous and decide to end it quickly. Carefully, I scoop up her lifeless body and take her with me. This is going to be a delicious evening. With a pounding heart, I sneak back home through the cellar door. As I finally make my way into the house, I hear out an exasperated sigh. Oh, no, not again. Mom comes in from behind me. This is the second one you've brought in this week. Her voice sounds exasperated, but I know that she will not be angry for long. I know how to play her. I just purr and rub up against her legs, and she bends down to pet me. End of story. Story number 32. Father, I have a confession, written by Blue Artista. He gripped the edge of the chair tightly, trembling as he spoke. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. Go on, my child. Through a thin screen separating them, the priest could see the obscured face hanging low. So, Father, I met this girl down at the bar a while back. Her name was Valerie. You know how it goes down, right? You slide onto the stool next to her, ask for 2 drinks, and hit her up the best way you can. I mean, she's great, tight body, real supple. Anyways, we were seeing each other for a month before she started to smell. Smell? Sounds rather crude, but what about it? Call me crazy, Father, but I've always known how to tell when a good man turns bad. It's always difficult at the start, don't get me wrong. It's like when milk just begins to sour. You don't catch the smell unless you look for it, but it always stomps deep inside. A patch of rot grows right in the heart, and it spreads like a cancer cells throughout the body. Past a certain point, the smell of decay. God, it makes me gag. Well, son, I've never heard of anything like that before. I don't know what this has to do with I'm getting there, Father. I'm here to tell you I killed her. This is no joking matter. Who said I was? The priest looked outside the booth. The dimly lit church was empty. He was all alone. Why? How can you be sure that you're not delusional? Oh, I wish I was, Father. I was 16 when I first caught a whiff of it on my dad. He always cared for us, so nice and so gentle. The smell got worse, and he nearly beat my mom to death. I smelled it on my kind old neighbor, and what do you know, the cops got him from doing things to little kids. It's my gift, and I have to make use of it. I know I have to kill them before the evil takes over and drives them to do worse. But that can't be the only way. Do you shower yourself when you smell the stink on your skin? Why don't you pluck out the weeds before the garden becomes overgrown? There's no other way, Father. I'm sorry. A muffled pop split the air in two. The priest saw the fabric on his stomach darken and burn. 2 more pops sent him falling out of the chair and to the ground. I saw you at Mess last week, Father, and you were standing very close to me, close enough to tell. But I haven't done anything. The priest choked, struggling to hold on to what was left of his breath. You were going to. Am I wrong? The voice was now steady and cold. There is no other way. End of story. Story number 33. Excuse Me, written by Bookish Birdwatcher. One of my classmates as a grad school had an odd habit. Whenever he walked into an empty room, he'd whisper, "Excuse me." And when I asked him why, he said that it was a superstition from the country his parents had immigrated from. You were supposed to say that in case there was a ghost in the room. It was just polite. I recently relocated for a new job, and on the day of my move, after cramming all of my stuff into a U-Haul, I went back into my apartment one last time to make sure that I hadn't left anything behind. The place felt so empty, as if it had been abandoned for years, and without the music that I usually had playing in the background as I went about my daily business, it was eerily quiet. More to break the silence than anything else, I whispered, "Excuse me," and a voice whispered back, "Don't worry about it." End of story. Story number 34. The Sound of Silence, written by Dover Hawk. After a lifetime of being deaf, my best friend just received cochlear implants. When he woke up from the surgery, we all stood around him. His wife was the first one to say anything. He heard her voice and at once began to cry. We all took turns speaking, letting him hear our voices and our names, and with each word we said, he became more emotional. When we were all finished, silence hung in the room. He looked up at me and asked what that sound was. It took me a moment to understand what he was hearing, and I understood. I told him that he was hearing silence. He shook his head. "That isn't silence," he said slowly, hearing his own voice for the first time. "I've been hearing silence all my life, and this is different." A sound came just outside the hospital room, and he perked up immediately. "Isn't that silence?" We all exchanged looks of trepidation around the room before I said, "No," I said slowly. "That was the sound of someone screaming." End of story. Story number 35. The Ones We Call Horsemen, written by Red Lazy Bear. The first one lives in our souls. Nowadays you see glimpses of it in Hong Kong, in Chile, in Lebanon, and in some places where we got so used to it that we don't even perceive it anymore. Syria, Mali, Afghanistan. You can also meet it in the fit of rage that you feel as someone elbows you in the subway, in the shouting match of your upstairs neighbors, in a decent, kind woman who suddenly snaps and shoots down her son's bully. At every election time, we call it gang violence, police plunder, assault, racism, tactical strike, aggression, genocide, class warfare. The second one lives in our bodies and minds. It inhabits the silent dread of understaffed hospitals. It nests in the waiting rooms of psychiatrists. You can visit it each time you go and see your grandparents slowly wasting away, or when your mate finally gets out of their room looking like they cried to get anything for dinner. Just like the first one, it rules entire countries, and we get used to it. We call it cancer, depression, AIDS, old age, broken bones and infected wounds, flu and heart attack, diabetes or schizophrenia. The third one lives in our hearts. We can hear it whisper to us all the time. Each moment you stuff your face or restrain yourself to look pretty. Each time you buy another thing that you don't need, forged by a virtual slave at the other end of the world. And each moment when a triad parent avoids a Christmas-decorated street because they can't afford a present for their kid. It feeds the two first ones because of what we miss. We take it by force or it weakens us. And it is the one we're most afraid of, to the point of throwing others to it to avoid going anywhere near it. We call it lack, impatience, hunger, thirst, addiction, growth, consumption, and alcoholism. We call them horsemen. I met the fourth one yesterday. It welcomed us all in the end. It weeps as we come into it screaming, weeping, or simply shattered. Few ever come to it willingly, and these ones, it cries for their past. Many beg or bribe or attack it. No one ever escapes it. As I lied dying, the paramedics rushed to get me to the hospital, and my fiancée cried holding my hand. I met it, and it was kind. It offered me words of regret for the acts of the three other ones. It told me it had tried to convince them to stop hurting us, but that they would never heed its call. So now, as it sent me back, it gave me a message to deliver unto humankind. It said, "Please send them to me. Please banish war, famine, and pestilence from this realm. Please be better. And when you finally do, I will welcome them in my arms and then leave. Theirs will be the only death I ever welcome without tears." End of story. Story number 36. She Doesn't Have to Be So Smug About It, written by my XL Plixel. I walked downstairs to find my wife sitting at the kitchen table, drinking her coffee, a smug smile plastered on her face. I heaved a sigh, but I didn't say anything. I got so sick of that smug smile of hers. She made more money than me, had more friends than me, had even had better sex than I was. None of this would have mattered if she didn't enjoy rubbing it in my face so much, always giving me that smug smile. I left without a word to her. Her smug smile had only the last thing I saw before I left the house. That smile haunted my entire day. It was all I saw when I closed my eyes. I saw it in every other smile I saw throughout the day. It was driving me crazy, and it had been for months. I just wanted to be rid of her stupid, smug smile. On my way home, I bought more ammo for my shotgun. I'd only had the thing about a week, but I was ready to put it to the test. I got home, and I stuck the box of shells in my coat pocket and walked inside. I could hear her in the kitchen puttering around as I went upstairs and loaded the shotgun. With clicking sound, I pumped the gun and headed downstairs to the kitchen. She didn't even turn around as I put the gun to the back of her head and blew away her smug smile. I dragged her body out into the fenced backyard and buried her in the hole that I'd left dug for the septic tank. Then I went upstairs to bed. There she was in the kitchen table the next morning, still covered in dirt, as she sipped her coffee with that smug smile. I know that this was the 20th attempt, but she really didn't have to be so smug about it. End of story. Story number 37. I Begged You, written by Stella Path. Please, I'm literally begging you, I say, but the executioner only sighs and gives me a truly sorrowful look as he slides the IV into my arm. The chaplain sits beside me. Once he pushes the button, the drugs will be administered in quick succession. Unconsciousness will occur in roughly 30 seconds, and death soon after that. He explains, even though I've heard it so many times before. Any final words? Just again, please. Just don't do this, I say. The chaplain nods sadly, as sorrowful that I do not face my executioner with a clean conscience. That's the thing, though. I haven't murdered anyone. It's been this way my entire life. I don't know why, but whenever I would accidentally hurt myself, others near me would receive the wound. I once got a paper cut in class that caused 3 people around me to bleed from their fingers. In high school, I was in a car accident, and even though my side of the car was hit, my girlfriend developed a broken leg. I always was very careful. I take care of myself, trying to stay in the very best of health. But when I was mugged by a trio and he shot me in the face, their faces exploded, not mine. And when the cops came, they found me kneeling beside their bodies, trying to figure out what to do with stupidly holding their gun. Around 30 seconds after the execution started, I saw both executioner and chaplain fall to the floor with a hard thump. "I begged you," I repeated sadly. End of story. Chapter 38. Intrusive Thoughts, written by Sondering Stranger. We've all had them, strange little things, aren't they? One moment you are yourself, and in the next, for one small instance, someone else is in your head. Ignore the red light. Go through. Don't you want to see how many cars pile up? I could grab that child and throw them over the bridge. Their mother would never be able to react in time. I would be so easy to grab that knife. I've never stabbed anyone before in the stomach. Don't worry, it's not you. You are fine, healthy, and whole mentally. Those are not your thoughts. I'll let you in on a little secret. An intrusive thought is the weakest form of possession. Most aren't even from a singular ghost. Stop for a moment. Think. Where were you, or what were you holding when that came to you? How many people had died on the road with that sharp turn around that bend? Just go straight. Don't worry about the turn. How many suicides happen on that particular bridge you pass on your daily walks? Would people scream if you jumped? Would anyone notice at all? Only one way to find out. How many people that own the gun you bought just aim and pull the trigger? He's been yelling at you all day. You don't deserve that treatment. The ghosts add up, miserable, angry, enraged at the knowledge that death did not receive them kindly, furious in some cases that someone made the decision for them. And they see you, us, me. They see you content, they see you depressed, they see you in all the ways that you hate it. And they whisper and they chant in their congregations like a buzzing of an angry hive, just a pitch too high for human ears, anger overflowing each failed possession. Sometimes they manage to get into your mind, just for a second, just enough to make you think about it. And sometimes they get you on a particularly bad day. They take your body too, just for a second. They don't need any longer than that. End of story. Story number 39. After the Flash, written by Grilled Lettuce 2_0. I looked up from my phone. Tears ran down my eyes. The whole class was silent. The teacher sat in a chair by her desk. All of the students were calling their parents, saying their goodbyes, and praying. Their teacher finally stood up from her seat and broke the veil of silence that shrouded the entire class. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Amen. All of the students repeated, Amen. And suddenly a brilliant light shone through the windows, consuming the vision of every student in the class. And what came after it? A shockwave that shook the earth to its very core, and the sound that ruptured the eardrums of every unfortunate soul that heard it. And what stood over the ruins like an angry god? A mushroom cloud. End of story. Story number 40. Martha's Garden, written by Twisted Moose. Martha likes prunes. Every morning, Martha's alarm goes off at 7:39 a.m. It mustn't be set for 7:40, or else she would be awake at 7:41. Unacceptable. She snoozes twice, 10 minutes each, and rises at exactly 8 a.m. in a small, quaint home with 5 windows, 5 rooms, and 2 floors. The sun perfectly sparkles through the perfect window against the perfect dust in a perfect house. Everything is perfect in a humble abode on 1300 Ragland Avenue, except for her husband. Her husband is special. At 8:05 a.m., Martha walks to her antique stove, curvy and polished red like an old Corvette, and heats up 3/4 of a cup of water. Once the water boils, she adds 7 prunes and then a cup of oatmeal. She does this each morning, except for Thursdays. Thursdays are special. She eats her breakfast quickly, for she must be done by 8:40 a.m. After eating, she spends her mornings and afternoon perfecting and tending her precious garden, the finest part of her home, until 1 p.m., of course. Any longer would be unacceptable. As she walks towards her white French door, she listens to the quiet groans of her husband slowly waking and the ever-rising sun. No matter, her cursed husband is a miserable old prune, but everything else is perfect. She strides into a lovely little warm forest of white hydrangeas, white-rind potentilla with red dots at the centers, like small areolas, and a myriad of other plants, all perfect blends to the backdrop of her house's white siding. As she is pruning her plants, a dull knocking can be heard from the front of her house. It must be Tom. Tom Hargrove is a lovely man who comes to check on her and her husband every now and then. And of course, why wouldn't he? Martha is a petite little woman with curly white hair. With her husband's condition, if something happened, Martha surely would be helpless. Everything is well, nothing has changed, she replied. Sheriff Tom disappointedly departs, dismayed. Martha has an affinity for the color white. She likes white doors, white siding, white flowers, white lies. Eventually, her husband has now been missing for a few weeks. Alas, it's later than she expected, only 10 minutes to 1 p.m. She scuttles her backyard and hurriedly grabs her finest pruning shears in her finest plant. Her plants must be trimmed often. Only on Thursdays can Martha relent from perfecting her creation. On Thursdays, she rests. As she is pruning, her mind wonders, one day my husband will be finer. Every plant must be pruned and tended with patience, she reassures herself. Then carefully inserted the crisscross blood-stained wooden posts piercing through her husband's arms and legs, holding him up like a scarecrow. She carefully snips off the tips of the stubs of her husband's left ring finger and pinky finger, as well as a bit of his right earlobe. When he grows back, he'll be perfect too. End of story. Story number 41. My Last Time Babysitting by Discord and Dine. I checked my watch as I walked up the door. 10 minutes late. I'd been babysitting for them for 6 months. I was sure that I wouldn't mind. Mr. Lopez answered the door. Hey, I'm sorry I'm late, I started to say, but stopped when I saw him. His face was soaked in sweat, and he looked slightly agitated. No problem at all, he said, ushering me inside. In the kitchen, there was only a single light on, above the table. At it, Mrs. Lopez was writing something feverishly on a slip of paper. I'll, be right back. I have to say goodbye to Denise. Denise was their 1-year-old daughter, who I had been watching for them. She disappeared into the darkness of the hallway, heading up the stairs. What movie are you going to see tonight? I asked, setting my bag down on the table. The pad of paper had holes punctured through it, as if Mrs. Lopez had been pressing the pen down really hard. I don't know. I guess we'll decide when we get there, Mr. Lopez said, shifting from foot to foot, looking more worried by the minute. I noticed a pretty sizable cut in his right cheek, dribbled with the dried blood. Are you okay, Mr. Lopez? I asked, but before he could answer, I heard Mrs. Lopez returning from the upstairs. We should get going. Goodbye, Katie, she said, putting me into a hug. She tightened her grip for a moment, and I could have sworn that I heard a soft sob. Thank you for everything, she said, with great difficulty. She began to say something else, but her husband grabbed her and dragged her out the door. Before he closed it, he gave me a mournful, almost apologetic look. Then he closed the door, and I was alone in the dark house. I thought about going out and talking to them more and maybe even just leaving, but in the end I decided to stay. Not turning on the lights so as to not disturb Denise, I climbed up the stairs in the dark and headed for her room. I approached the crib and was about to lift her up when I saw the note laying on the top of the blankets. I read it by the streetlight that glared feebly through the window. Katie, I'm so sorry. He broke in while we were getting ready. He said that he was going to kill us and do horrible things to Denise. He asked if anyone knew about us, and we told him about you. It's an exchange. I'm so sorry. I hope that God will forgive us one day. Looking out of the window, I saw them pulling out of the driveway. They were crying. Perched on Mrs. Lopez's lap was Denise. Behind me, in the darkness, the door creaked open. End of story. Story number 42. Are You Scared of the Dark? Written by Anima Gaspepe. You aren't. There is no such thing as fearing the dark. Fearing the unknown? Sure. Being afraid of the bloody merry chants of your friends make in the middle of the night in the pitch-black bathroom. Go right freaking ahead. But don't ever disgrace my name, saying that you're scared of me, because I protected you for all those years. When you were fine, crying to Mummy and Daddy about the monster under your bed that you couldn't quite see because it was too dark. You ordered them to look and see if they could catch a glance. They couldn't. It was too dark. Lucky for you, the monster couldn't look at you as well. Or all the times you were in the shower thinking that there was someone right behind you. You were sure of it. You tried to look at it through the peripheral vision, but all you could see was ever-consuming blackness. I covered you like an invisibility cloak, like a mother that protects her children. Short answer, no, you're not scared of the dark. You are afraid of what hides behind me. So, when you are scared of something, just close your eyes. When the darkness welcomes you to your own ignorance, my advice, don't open them again. End of story. Story number 43. Who's There? Written by the Chagas. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. John was sleeping when he heard the glass-breaking noise downstairs in the kitchen. Frightened, he woke up and shouted, "Who's there?" No answer. He decided to go down and find out. He turned on the lights, and everything was in perfect condition. On returning to the room, he inadvertently bumped into a glass. The glass fell over. Silence. From above, a familiar voice shouts, "Who's there?" End of story. Story number 44. Take Her Swimming on the First Date. Written by Guy Orks. Fake lips, fake eyelashes, fake brows, fake complexion, fake curves, and fake hair. All that, and no wonder blokes don't trust women nowadays. I ring the doorbell and my date answers, looking just as stunning as when I'd asked her out at the pub. Antia is a Mediterranean beauty, dark blonde hair framing her bandaged dress, her olive skin as radiant. But that's just how she looks. Me and my mates know looks can be deceiving. The amount of foundation some of these stuck-up birds in the neighborhood trowel onto is atrocious. Who gave them the idea that a vain cake face is all what guys dig? Everyone always jokes about it. If you don't want to wake up the next to it too, you need to take her swimming first. Well, I'm not joking tonight. Where are we heading? Anthea coyly asks in my passenger seat. I hope I'm not overdressed. I reply. I was thinking that we could take a walk at the shore, sit on the pier and, just relax. Sure, sounds like a nice first date. Just, no swimming, okay? Typical princess, I think smugly as I nod. What Miss Perfect doesn't know is that I'm actually planning on a midnight dip in the sea for her. I'll be the ultimate gag, snapping a photo for the group chat of the Ice Queen melting after I tossed her off the pier. Tonight was wonderful, Alfie. Anthea swoons to me later that evening, dragging her legs over the jetty. Surreptitiously, I set my phone down on the boardwalk and record her climbing out into the ocean. Now it's finally showtime. Interlocking my fingers with hers, I suddenly send the two of us lurching into the water. As I surface, I see the running mascara and waterlog extensions. Indeed, my date swarm is beginning to melt away, but I'm just glimpsing his skin shedding into scales, fingers melding into wedded claws. I only tread water as the woman metamorphosizes into a serpent monster before my eyes. Whatever illusion the creature had going, seawater has clearly broken it, and Anthea is not happy. "We could have had such a nice time together," she hisses, incensed. "This is premature." With that, the sea siren viciously seizes me and drags me under the waves, her voice echoing and the water fills my lungs. I only take men drowning on their last date. End of story. Story number 45. Gender Reveal. Written by Give the Gin Mannerheart. Isn't this how life should be? I stand with my brother-in-law's backyard, eyeing the cold beer and good camaraderie. Technically, it's a Good Friday party, but everyone knows why they are really here. The piñata is tied up to a branch of a large oak tree several feet to my left. All I need now is for my beautiful wife to return and grant me permission to hack it down. Eventually, near the end of the afternoon, the woman of my dream reappears. She's holding a wiffle bat and wearing an ear-to-ear smile. She looks exactly like she did on our wedding day 8 months prior. Well, less frilly crown and flat stomach. Anyway, the most beautiful girl in the world walks over to me. She plants the bat in my hands and kisses me on my lips, and then she whispers in my ear, "Swing away, my love." God, I love this woman. I walk slowly to the piñata, doing my best to savor the moment. Once I arrive, I take a final anticipatory breath, draw back the back and behind my shoulder, and slam the plastic into the mule with all of my strength. I expect to see pink confetti symbolizing a girl, or blue confetti symbolizing a boy. I'm taken aback by the bits of black paper that begin fluttering to the ground. I look at my wife with confusion. Her face reads pure and unbridled joy. I hear the partygoers around me, all members of my wife's family, begin to erupt in a stunned euphoria as if they'd all simultaneously won the lottery. I stand frozen, bat still in hand, as the love of my life and her clan dance deliriously around the yard. It turns out that the Antichrist, much like Jesus himself, must be born to a human mother. End of story. Story number 46. I had to end things with my boyfriend tonight. Halloween 2019. Written by Joshua Andrew. We were going to a Halloween party this weekend as Mario and Peach. This was our first Halloween together, so I was really looking forward to presenting ourselves as a cute couple. When I got home from work, I found Brad shaving his mustache. I had repeatedly told him how it fit his costume better than the stick-on black felt that came with it, so I asked him what was going on. He told me, "Sorry, babe. John from work hooked me up with an inflatable dinosaur costume. It's got to be sweet." I played the part of the understanding, cool girlfriend and slipped upstairs to change into what I thought would be a nice surprise. I came down as a cave woman, but instead of an impressed reaction, Brad just smirked. I smiled back and started to ask for his baseball bat to dress up as a club, but he held up his hand and asked, "You just happen to have a backup costume too?" I didn't like the insinuation. I really was planning on going as Peach, but not now with the dinosaur on my arm. And I told him, of course, Halloween is my favorite holiday. I have a ton of costumes upstairs because I save everyone. Then he really tested my calm facade by saying, "Well, then, maybe you could pick another one, babe." I asked him what was wrong with the one, and he actually said, "Cat, come on. Dinosaurs and humans live like 100 million years apart. It would be ridiculous to go together." I breathed out a loud sigh, and I ran upstairs again and changed into a witch. I could live without going as a costume as it complimented Brad's, but the response was, "I don't know, Kate. It's kind of cliché." Fine, whatever. I changed into a sexy angel, but he rolled his eyes and told me, "Oh, please no. I don't want my girlfriend to be known as that kind of girl." Thoroughly fed up, I glared at him and asked, "I give up. What do you want me to go as?" Realizing that he'd messed up, Brad backpedaled. Come on, Kathy, you can go as whatever you want. You don't have to care about what I think. Frustrated to tears, I just ran upstairs and took all my costumes off. He clearly didn't understand how important my appearance was to me. Suddenly, without knocking like he normally did, ran into the room saying, "Catherine, babe, calm down, I already planned on ending things with this pompous jerk, but only after the party. His last mistake was taking that decision away from me. Brad froze at the sight of my true form. My many mouths opened up in anticipation. For his sake, I changed into a sexy devil. I strode seductively towards him, and Brad just stood there paralyzed with fear. So yeah, we're not together anymore. But, on the plus side, I finally decided I'm going as Brad for this year's Halloween. End of story. Story number 47. A message from your personal demons. Written by Mr. Graham. Hello, my dear. You do not know who I am, but I know you. I am one of the 3 demons you were assigned to at birth. You see, some people in this world are destined for greatness, destined to live a life happy, fulfilling lives. You, I am afraid, are not one of those people, and it is our job to make sure of that. Who are we? Oh, yes, of course, how rude of me. Allow me to introduce us. Shame is my younger brother, the demon on your left shoulder. Shame tells you that you're a freak, that those thoughts that you have are not normal, that you will never fit in. Shame whispers into your ear when your mother found you playing with yourself as a child. Shame is the one who makes you hate yourself. Fear sits on your right shoulder. He is my older brother, as old as life itself. Fear fills every dark corner with monsters, turns every stranger on a dark street into a murderer. Fear stops you from telling your crush how you feel. He tells you it is better not to try than let people see you fail. Fear makes you build your own prison. Who am I, then? I am the worst of your demons, but you see me as a friend. You turn to me as if nothing else, because I live in your heart. I am the one who forces you to endure. I am the one who prolongs your torment. Sincerely, Hope. End of story. Story number 48. Quantum Immortality. Written by Holy is the Lord. The story of quantum immortality entails the hypothesis that when someone dies in a dimension, they carry on alive and well in another timeline. The death of a person is mourned in the previous timeline, but the continuity remains unbroken in the new one. I set out to explore this concept. I've been down on my luck, estranged from my family, and am financially ruined after a string of failed experiments that never became profitable. With nothing left to lose, I decided to put quantum immortality to the test. The first experiment was by hanging. It was discontinued timeline. My body convulsed before hanging silently and still. Without family and in the frozen winter months, where the stench wouldn't spread as quickly, I'll assume it took weeks for my body to be discovered. In my new timeline, the rope snapped after I lost consciousness. I woke up with quite a bruise around my neck and a headache that you would not imagine. But I'm alive. My next experiment involved a head-on collision with a semi-truck. The impact must have been quite the sight to behold in my previous life. I can't say that I won't be sorry to miss the carnage. In my new timeline, the trucker swerved at the last minute, and I continued on without incident down the road. My experiments continued. A gunshot to the head. The gun fired. Poisoning. I vomited up the concoction within minutes. Jumping from a ledge. My fall was broken by the foliage below. I walked away with some broken ribs and a fractured femur. But I'm alive. Astounding results. Time moves forward, leaving behind a string of my corpses in other dimensions. I begin to live without fear of consequences. I've died many times, yet I go on. No longer fearing my end, I traveled, I whined, I dined, I broke the law and lived recklessly. I was at my peak when life took a turn in a way that I did not expect. While hiking in the rural parts of Asia, I lost my balance and fell into a body of water. My hiking gear dragged me below the depths. I struggled when everything went black. Unbeknownst to me, some villagers must have rescued me. Without the aid of proper medical equipment, they must have mistaken my coma for death. I awake now in the darkness. The air is thick and stagnant. The box in which I am contained refuses to give. I claw, I scratch, I scream, and kick, to no avail. I'm burning of my lungs as the oxygen gives out is excruciating. I slip into nothingness as my life leaves me. Moments later, I'm awake, no oxygen, kicking, clawing. Any damage I do to the coffin is repaired in my next life, and my next life, and my next life. I lie here, suffocating, and suffocating, and suffocating. End of story. Story number 49. The Town with No Name, written by Rock Paper Cynic. All three of us were silent as we drove past the blank welcome sign into the town with no name. The people all watched us with the same slack expressions, their heads tilted in identical angles as if listening to a single far-off sound. For a moment, I heard it too. For a moment, the people in the car seemed like strangers, and I couldn't remember who we were or where we were going. But when we passed the last house, it came back to us. We were all old friends, all traveling together, all safe, all four of us. End of story. Story number 50. The corner of my room is snoring, written by Kimber65. I awaken groggily at first until my mind processes what exactly stirred me back to consciousness. There is no mistaking it, the sound of disconcerting location. My heartbeat spikes and my mind races. Every muscle tenses and freezes, and a million potential horrors prick through my mind. It's just my husband. My brain reassures me, and I begin to relax. His snoring has gotten worse and worse as the years have passed. On bad nights he's been known to even wake himself up with it. Never mind my own oft-troubled sleep. And the acoustics of the room have always been strange, I reason, and my heart finally slows. Our new house is far bigger than the old, and we don't have furniture enough to fill it yet. A chief's salary will pay the mortgage, but not much else, it seems. Sound echoes through the empty spaces in ways that it shouldn't, daunting me with possibilities of what might be lurking. I roll over to rub his back, which tends to ease the snoring and guide him back into a deeper slumber. I laugh to myself as I imagine the smile he'll crack at my wild imagination when I tell him the story of a breakfast. My hand pats an empty bed, burst the soft confusion, and then a more frantic, desperate search. A thread of icy remembrance slips down my spine. My husband left for deployment this morning, the first since we moved to this new house. My corner isn't snoring now. Not now that it knows that I'm awake. End of story. Story number 51. The Wallet in the Sewer, written by MacDog2395. My folks dropped me off just outside the main gates. Call us and let us know how your midterms go, my dad said. I smiled and replied that I would. I gave them both a hug and stepped out into the sidewalk and waved them by as they merged back into traffic. That was a great weekend, but it was time to get back to my usual college routine. As I bent down to pick up my bags, I saw it. A wallet that was lodged between the grills of the sewer grate at my feet. I pried it out carefully. It was black with a silver zipper along the top. A faded Hello Kitty sticker decorated the bottom right corner, suggesting that the wallet most likely belonged to a girl. I opened it up and my eyes widened. $100 bill. There must have been a dozen of them. I immediately glanced around to make sure no one had noticed, and I headed back as fast as I could to the safety and privacy of my own dorm room. Once there, I emptied the contents of the wallet. $4,000 in total. No ID. There was, however, a wallet-sized high school graduation picture of a girl. She had shoulder-length golden brown hair and a cheerleader smile. She was pretty, and the next thing I knew, I forgot about the cash and found myself staring at the picture. I got knocked out of the fugue state as I heard footsteps outside. My roommate was due back any moment, and I didn't want him to catch me with all the cash, so I put everything away as I held on to the photo. I made inquiries about the girl in the photo. It took some time, but I finally found her. Her name was Rebecca, but people called her Becky. Once I got her name, it was only a matter of time at finding her. She was a freshman who worked part-time at nights in the sports complex. The sports complex was in the process of massive renovations. When I approached it, I swore it looked like a bomb had hit it. Once inside, it didn't take me long to find her. She was sitting inside the entrance booth. She didn't look at all like the girl in the photo. Whereas the girl in the photo was bright-eyed and cheery, this girl looked sullen and bored. "Becky?" I asked. She looked up at me. I was half expecting to see her smile, but she didn't. In fact, from the way that she looked at me, it made me feel like I was bothering her. "Yeah," she said. I have something for you." I reached into my school bag and I pulled out my .22. Becky didn't have much of a chance to react when I double-tapped her in the head. I quickly left the side entrance. On my way back to the dorm, I sent out a text on my burner phone. "Job's done. I expect the second half of the payment in the same spot." End of story. Story number 52. The Blind Child, written by R.V. Coney. "Stabbing." Sylvia pointed a trembling finger at my brother Arthur. Her murky, unseeing eyes gleamed in his direction, and his wife Agnes trembled with indignation from across the table. My husband's face colored as he dropped his fork and dragged our daughter back into her room, scolding her as they went. The rest of the night was awkward, and the pep in our conversation never recovered. 2 weeks later, Agnes was stabbed to death in her office in the parking lot. An inebriated college student found her, almost vomiting all over, and called the cops. My brother swore that he bore no ill will against my daughter, but I could tell that he was lying. One day, a middle-aged woman who taught my daughter how to read her braille called me. "Ma'am, I don't know what's going on, but your daughter's been whispering electrocution, for the past hour and a half, and it's starting to distract her from her lessons. Could you please talk to her?" I did. Sylvia, in her 9-year-old lack of understanding, told me it was just a cool new word that she'd learnt at school. The death of an electrician made headlines the following week. It was a freak accident involving tangled wires and a bucket of water. Sylvia's teacher's face was blurred for privacy, but her voice was as familiar as anything to me. "He was my partner, my soulmate." While my husband was working late, I called Sylvia into the living room. "Honey, is there anything you want Mommy to know?" She hesitated. "Honey, you know you can talk to me." She denied it once more. "I have no secrets from you, Mommy." My husband walked into the living room, and his hair was tousled and his eyes distant. Instead of rushing to hug her dad, Sylvia simply pointed towards him. "Fire," she said. My heart stopped. Every time Alvia said something like that, it was the person's partner who died, and for that reason too, a fire. Was Sylvia merely making predictions, or was she putting a curse on me for snooping around in her business? Why, this devil child! I grew paranoid, and checking the appliances and electronics constantly, and cleared the house of any fire hazards. That was my life over the next few days. All the while, I kept my eyes on Sylvia. Sylvia. I had almost grown hateful towards my own daughter. My husband came home one night, wounded and blackened with soot, while I sat in the living room and Sylvia listened to the radio beside me. "What's the matter?" I asked. He gulped. "One of my colleagues, her house caught fire. She was strapped in, but I managed to escape." That turned the gears in my head. What were you doing in her house? No expression on my husband's face was sufficient admission of guilt. I opened my mouth to speak. No. Scream. But the smaller voice from beside me looked at me and whispered, "Poisoning." End of story. Story number 53. I Love My Dolls, written by Southern Fried FXCK. I often enjoyed sitting in the silence admiring my beautiful dolls. I adore their little porcelain faces and their rosy red cheeks. I have 8 dolls in total, 4 boys and 4 girls. They all have different appearances, but they're all stunning in their own way. When my husband passed away, I was often alone, so I had a lot of time to kill. Now I have a perfect family, then I couldn't be happier. Myself and my little family do absolutely everything together. We play together, we watch TV together, we eat together, we bathe together, and we sleep in the same bed together. I am never alone anymore, and my children are always by my side. I let out a satisfied sigh as I think about how perfect my life is. I cuddle into my dolls closer and inhale their glorious flowery scent. I stroke their beautiful hairs and kiss each one of them on the forehead. "Who loves you?" I ask playfully. "Mommy loves you." And I give them the light-hearted tickle and each tummies and giggle. I glance at the clock. It's already 8:45 p.m. I know it sounds cliché, but time really does fly when you're having fun. Right, my darlings, it's bedtime. Yes, Henry, it's bedtime now. Please, don't argue with Mummy. Yes, Poppy, I'll sing to you all before you go to sleep. Come on now, let's get you into your pajamas and get cozy under the blanket. I get into my own pajamas first before I change my dolls into their pajamas. I then lie with them in my bed. And I lie between them all, and I'm warm and cozy, and I let out another sigh of satisfaction. I cuddle with my babies closer and start singing "Rock-a-bye Baby" in the treetop. When the wind blows, the cradle will rock. I let my eyes drift down slowly until my mind goes into free fall, my head whirling with the wonders of dreams. I jolt. I'm sure I heard a bang. I look at my clock. It's 3:15 a.m. I'm sure it was nothing. I stroke and shush my dolls. Mummy's here. Please. What on earth? Another bang, and another, which sounded like the front door being caved in. I rock my babies to reassure them. This must be a bad dream. What happens next confirms otherwise. A bunch of uniformed officers with guns burst into my room. Jesus Christ! One of them gasps. What the frick? Another says. Excuse me. My babies are trying to sleep. You must have the wrong house, I shout. She's freaking sleeping with them. One of the officers mumbles, gagging. Mrs. Jones, I'm arresting you on suspicion of kidnap and murder of 8 young children. You do not have to say anything. I gulp back at the officer, stunned. Then I look at my dolls. They're not how they looked the night before. They're all scraggly and grey, and they have the most awful, sickening sweet smell. They almost look like corpses. End of story. Story number 54. When I die, the day starts over. Written by ETR4807. I was never able to figure out when or how I gained this power, but I can tell you the first time I realized it. Sunday, April 17th, 1960. I was 12 then, at the first time I died, riding my bike in front of a car that I didn't see until it was far too late. Imagine my surprise when I woke up in my bed. Imagine my confusion at being told to hurry up and get ready for church. Imagine my sheer sense of wonder as the rest of the day played out exactly the same as the first. Right down to the same car passing harmlessly by as I stared at it from the sidewalk with my mouth hanging wide open. I was 18 when I died again. It was Vietnam, shot by a sniper I never saw. I didn't see him the second time either, but the third time I was finally able to spot him, and on the fourth I was able to get him before he got anyone in my company. Vietnam gave me an unwilling chance to fully explore and understand my ability. Live and the day moves on, die and the day resets. Simple in hindsight, but I had no movies such as Groundhog Day or Edge of Tomorrow to help me try and understand. It wasn't until I returned from the war that I started to use it for selfish reasons. College was increasingly easy when you can just kill yourself after you find out what the questions are on the test, and if you ever needed a tip on the stock markets, I was your guy. By the 1990s, I had amassed over $15 million, married the love of my life, and had 3 beautiful children. The only thing I didn't have, worries. I had the desire to do more. I had saved a lot of people while I was in Vietnam, but I wanted to help more, to be a part of a greater good, to try and make the world a better place, as corny as that may sound. A police scanner and a gun gave me all I needed to do that. Listen for crimes and reset the day, prevent the crimes, and the amount of lives I was able to save would make your head spin. All those near misses on terror plots that got discovered at the last moment. You're welcome. And so, that was my life, right up until a few months ago. Fight crime by day, love my family by night, reset and repeat. I had everything I could ever want, and I wouldn't have traded my ability for anything. But now, as I lay in my bed, surrounded by my loved ones, my house filled with hundreds of cards and bouquets from countless people whose lives I've helped, feeding the organs shutting down, preparing to die of pancreatic cancer for the 9,473rd day in a row. I wonder about that. End of story. Story number 55. People used to walk on me, written by Cheesy G. People used to walk on me. Children jumped over my cracks, cheerfully singing their superstitions. Couples strolled along me late at night. All walks of life walked on me. One day, everyone seemed to pick up the pace, and as people went by with their leisurely strolls, I felt how heavy their steps had become. The drag on their feet became the only thing I knew. But then less people walked to me. Over time, I soon forgot the feeling of a man's gait. I no longer felt the tap of a children's feet or the stroll of a woman. I only felt the stomp of boots. I began to feel not only boots, but full bodies. They dropped on me and never seemed to leave. A liquid always seemed to spill shortly after. I felt the nearby rumble of giant machinery. Their slow and ominous vibrations began to expand my cracks. When I started to break apart, I waited for a worker to come and patch me up. But they never came. Now I lay here in pieces, blown up, crushed and broken. I fear no one will be able to walk on me again, and no one has in a long time. People used to walk on me, but now I don't feel any more. End of story. Story number 56. No One Noticed, written by middle name redundant. No one noticed when the school bus turned down the Brownsville lane. If they had, they might have wondered why, since no one lives that way, and certainly no children. But no one did. Then the bus rattled and shook down the washboard surface of the road. Very few of the children on board were concerned. They rode the bus every day. It was safe and predictable, and if there was a change in schedule, they surely knew it was done under the watchful eye of an adult. A girl in the middle sat alone, staring wide-eyed at the changing landscape around her. The bus drove on down Brownsville Lane, the trees growing thicker as the sky disappeared from sight. Before long, the bus was shrouded in total darkness, and the children began to notice that something was amiss. One boy gave a nervous cheer, not understanding that the bees buzzing inside his stomach was fear, not excitement. The rest of the children followed, buoyed by the inherent glee, if not being headed towards school. Anxious chatter filled the bus until finally the girl in the middle walked, shyly, haltingly, to the front. Then the driver stared ahead, navigating the increasingly narrow path the bus followed. "Excuse me," she said in a voice barely a whisper. "Where are we going?" The driver didn't answer. She tugged on his sleeve. "Excuse me, sir. We have to go to school." The driver slammed his foot on the brakes, silencing the overlapping conversation at the rear of the bus. Wordlessly, still staring ahead, he opened the door for the girl. She gulped and stepped off into the humid mid-morning air. Her feet had barely touched the ground before the bus roared away. leaving her standing alone on the dirt road. The eyes watched her from the back of the window were fearful, all the previous adventurousness gone. The girl watched until the bus disappeared from view and started the long, long walk back to town. End of story. Story number 57. That day had teeth. Wolves in mother care. It's not a story I always like talking about. I'll do it quick. I linger too long and I can get worked up. It was summer, morning, early, maybe 5 a.m. I dressed quickly for work, kissed both of you and your mother goodbye. Outside in the front car, I stopped and looked into the sky. It was completely birdless, quiet, the pale urine yellow of the early morning summer, little bits of indifferent clouds, alien clouds, strips of rotten gauze. It felt like the day was primed and ready for something, some kind of event. It had teeth. Driving to work felt like a slow-motion nightmare. No cars on the road, no people, no birds. To this day just, where were the birds? I looked, and all there was a fever yellow sky clawing and watching. Those ugly clouds like claw marks in the sky. You'll think I'm crazy. No, I'm fine. I'll carry on. So, in the distance I saw a car on the hard shoulder. Its hazards were on. As I pressed, I looked over. Front seats empty. 2 little girls in the back. Pigtails, deep brown eyes. They watched me pass. They had dolls. Your age back then. Maybe younger. I thought of you and worried for them. Before I could think, I saw a man. He must have been their father, I thought, walking up the side of the road, carrying a canister, getting petrol. I knew the station was not too far a walk from here. Maybe 10 minutes. He looked tired. I thought maybe I should stop and give him a lift. Maybe. Funny thing is, I just knew, if I got out of my car, under that yellow sky, I'd bounce off like a spaceman. That's what the air was like I was on another planet. I'd bounce, and all would be quiet, and the birds would cease existing forever, and I would never hear them sing again. But I didn't tell myself that. I told myself I'd be late for work. So I didn't stop. I kept going. I just kept going. 2 days later, there was a story in the newspaper. I read the headline and my breath caught in my throat. Everything turned yellow. A man had fallen asleep in his truck. Poor, overworked bastard. Killed himself later, I think. And plowed into the car with the little girls and their dolls. Swerved right off the road. Killed them instantly. I dropped the paper and found both of you playing and held you close. I'm not ashamed to say I cried. I didn't tell your mother why. Well, now I think about the father sometimes. Where is he now? Whether he had more children, whether his wife stood by him. But most of all, I wonder if he's alive to dream, and if he dreams of the yellow too. End of story. Story number 58. Margaret's Necklace, written by Gara0816. Everyone at the academy envied, if not talked about, Margaret's necklace. It was silver with a crucifix pendant. When light struck it, it bounced back in millions of reflections like a diamond. But that was not why they envied it. You see, Margaret's necklace was special. Special in a way that it could tell if you were a sinner or not. If you cut class and you lied about it to the dean, she would call Margaret. Margaret would let you touch her necklace, and if it burned your finger and you pulled it back immediately with a yelp or an ouch or whatever exclaimed that it hurt, you meant that it was you who sinned. You would have been sent to the confession room. It's like a lie detector, but not only that. Margaret's necklace could tell if you'd been naughty or good. Every end of the week, we'd all line up to touch Margaret's necklace. If it didn't burn our fingers, it meant that we didn't do a sin or wrongdoing, or that our motives throughout the week were good. If it burned, the guilty were called sinners and sent to the confession room. Oh, and you couldn't steal that necklace from Margaret either, because we had a new student one time and he saw Margaret's necklace shimmer like a diamond. So he tried to grab it, but it burned his hand that you heard the short sizzle and the smoke. His palm was sore and the chain lace left the burn marks on it. We soon found out he stole other things before. It was Christmas, and I really wanted to know which my cousin stole my grandfather's watch. I wanted to borrow Margaret's necklace and prove it, but Margaret said that she couldn't lend it to me, and she couldn't come over since it was Christmas. But I was desperate, you see. Grandfather would punish me. My motives was clean, and I know that it would not be a sin to prove myself and my cousins, so I went to her. But when I got to her house and I sneaked in, she was already asleep, and her necklace was shimmering in the moonlight. I touched it, and it burned in my hand a bit, so maybe it was a sin to borrow when she wouldn't consent. But it didn't hurt much. I was able to remove the necklace, and as I got it out of her neck, the burning worsened. I did not know what that meant, though, either because I realized that the necklace's purpose was not actually for telling lies from the innocent, or because when Margaret started to float over the bed while twitching, I realized I let something out that was supposed to be sealed in her. End of story. Story number 59. One Last Lie, written by Musmar Cat. Do it. The news had told us that it was just like the movies and comic books. The dead had risen and were eating the living, but these weren't like the ones in the comic books. They were smart. They knew how to get around, and they knew how to plan. They knew where to look. I lied when I told her that it was all fake. Do it. I started down in South America. It was quickly spreading through Europe, Asia, and the rest of the continent. Before we knew it, Mexico was gone, and the U.S. military was defending the border. But they were running out of people. One less soldier for us meant one more for them. I lied when I told her there was no way that they could get in. Do it. County by county, state by state, they ravaged it all. Internet, gone. Phone lines, gone. Communication, gone. We decided to stay at home and secure it as much as possible, since we didn't know where else to go. I lied when I told her the door could hold. Do it, Jacob, she whispered. I can't. I answered, crying as quietly as possible. You said you would. You promised. I hear them now walking into our living room, going through our stuff. There must be at least 30, and it sounds like some are making their way upstairs. Please, she whispered. One for me, one for you, then it'll all be over. They were outside the door now. They were trying to open it. I looked at the gun in my hand. All those lies I told her. I wish I hadn't lied about how many bullets I had left. End of story. Story number 60. A child's testimony, written by Nuclear Pro. I love my sister Beth. She's the greatest sister in the whole wide world. She plays with Daddy and me, and even though she says she's too old to play with little girls, and when I have a bad dream, she snuggles with me, so I'm not scared. She was too scared to snuggle when a bad man came. We both were. Beth was asleep, but I saw the bad man climb into the window. I was too frightened to move. The bad man grabbed Beth and covered her mouth. He held her in the air, squirming till she stopped. I lay, quietly acting like I was asleep. The bad man looked at me, but must have heard my daddy's voice, because he turned quickly and walked out the room and jumped out of the hallway window. I screamed for my daddy, but when he walked in, all he could do was hold Beth and rock her back while he cried. I cried too, told Daddy that it would be okay, that I saw everything, and that I would tell on the bad man that hurt my sister. The police came and looked at everything. There were so many people, and I was trying so hard to get them to listen, but they wouldn't. Not until one of them noticed me yelling and picked me up. The policeman reached behind me and pulled my string. I stopped yelling and said, "You're my best friend." That wasn't true, but I said it all the same. He opened the hole in my chest and pulled out my secret camera. The picture showed that the bad man and what he did to my sister. The bad man went to work with my daddy, so the policeman found him and put him in jail. Daddy doesn't play with me anymore. Sometimes I ask him if we can have a tea party like we used to with Beth, but he doesn't listen. Not even when I tell him he's my best friend. He just looks at me with a scared look and locks me in a room. I know he misses Bess. I miss her too. The room is so quiet now that she's gone. End of story. Story number 61. Death's First and Last Day. Written by Canon02. Is it difficult getting everyone? I asked. He smiled, shaking his head. He had tired eyes and slouched in a way that made him seem shorter than his towering height. He had dark hair that was pushed loosely out of his face, which was narrow and pale, yet he smiled on, a smile that was sure and confident. Most people are ready when it's their time. It's the living that can't deal with me properly, he stated as we walked down the stairs to the subway. And where do you take them? Is there an heaven? Or a hell? I asked. He paused for a moment and shook his hand at the side to side. I suppose so. It's whatever you make of it, I think. You don't know for sure, I pushed. He shook his head. Not exactly in the job description. Why would I need to know? I'll find out when my job is over, I guess, he explained. I nodded at that, pleased enough with the answer. So why tell all of this to me? He smiled, shrugging. It's more than what I was told, and might give you some comfort, he said, before placing a hand onto my shoulder. And just like that, he was gone, and I was left alone with a job that no one could prepare for. He was right, though. He was right, though. It wasn't difficult getting people, but it sure was lonely. End of story. Story number 62. Best Friends, written by T. Cullen. I was on my way to my parent-teacher interview with my son Billy's teacher when I ran into a young boy. He was sitting in a chair on the porch of an old white bungalow just half a block from the school. He waved at me and said, "Hello, Mr. Danaher." I waved back, although I didn't recognize him. He said, "I'm friends with Billy." I hesitated because I had not met this boy before, and we live in a fairly small town. I said, "Well, nice to meet you. What did you say your name was?" "I'm Nicholas Martins. Billy and I are in the same class." "Well, Nick, I hate to rush, but I'm just on my way to meet your teacher, Mr. Atkinson." "Okay, it was nice to meet you." "It was nice to meet you too, Dick. Tell Billy that I'll be in the basement." The last thing that struck me as odd to say, but I imagined my son would know what it meant. I was running late, and when I got there my husband and Mr. Atkinson were already talking. My husband grew up in this town, and Mr. Atkinson, who was close to retirement, had worked for the school when he went there. "Sorry I'm late," I said as I kissed my husband on the cheek and took the chair next to him. "Oh, no worries," Mr. Atkinson said. "William and I were just reminiscing." My husband smiled. "I'm afraid Nicky and I used to give Mr. Atkinson a hard time when we were younger." I laughed. "That's weird. I just met one of Billy's friends down the street. His name is Nick as well. Nick Martins." A disturbing silence fell over my husband and Mr. Atkins as they both stared intently at me. "You met a boy named Nicholas Martins?" my husband asked. "Yeah," I said hesitantly. "Did he say anything?" asked Mr. Atkinson slowly. "Not really," I said. "I was in a bit of a rush, and he just told me to tell Billy that he'll be in the basement." "Where did you run into him?" asked my husband. "He was outside the old white bungalow just down the street." My husband turned, and he and Mr. Atkinson stared at one another. "What's going on?" I asked, exasperated. "Who is Nicholas?" My husband kept his eyes on Mr. Atkinson. "Nick Martins was my best friend," he told me, "up until he disappeared in 3rd grade. A long silence followed until my husband finally spoke again. "Mr. Atkins, what are we going to find in your basement?" End of story. Story number 63. My neighbor has been standing out in his front lawn for hours. Written by Minister of Owls. He's still there, staring at my bedroom window. I don't understand what he's doing. His name is Thomas. Thomas is not a nice man. He's a bastard who should have died years ago. But he's never acted like this before. God, what is he doing? He's staring, dead silent. His wife, where the frick is she? Hold on, I see her. She's coming down with that cane. Going to give him a smack, I hope. She didn't. She's on my lawn now, staring at my house. They're not talking. They don't look angry, and I don't think they even noticed each other. A few minutes later, their daughter Anna came down to stare. Anna is blind. I'm watching the whole family from my living room window. Little Tommy, the evening newspaper kid, was cycling down the street. Now he took one look at my house and stopped. He's standing on the street right now. All of my neighbors are slowly getting out of their houses. Little children, old men, cars are stopping in the middle of the road so the occupants can press their faces against the glass and gawk at my house. Old Miss Aggie, who can't walk, opened her bedroom window, and I can see her silhouette looming there, hands on the glass. It's getting dark now. They're still standing there, so silent, like they're dead or something. So many people now, on their front lawns and the streets, just staring at my house, at my bedroom window. I hear things coming upstairs, something moving, something talking, breathing. Hundreds of people breathing. My eyes had been struck looking at the ceiling for so long. It took hours to write because I can't look away from the ceiling. Only seconds. Just now everyone started moving. They started walking to my house. I'm going to go upstairs now. I need to see what's up there. End of story. Story number 64. Guardian Angel, written by the Mad Wop. 5 a.m. on the dot. It wasn't uncommon for me to wake up at this time. Something internally would rouse me from my sleep at that exact time every morning. I was partly grateful for this. I could look out of the window and take in the slow rise of the sun on the horizon. My window looked directly out onto the street that spanned its way to the main road. Cars sat on either the pavement, making it relatively impossible to walk anywhere but in the middle of the road. Every weekday, Monday to Friday, at 5 a.m., I would see the same woman meandering her way down the road until she made it to the doorstep of a house about 50 yards from my window. She looked about, I would say, in her 20s, from what I could see. She was always immaculately dressed. Her white shirt looked stream-pressed. Her shoes were polished and gleaming in the morning light. Her hair was searing auburn red, which delicately caressed her shoulders and dainty curls. I felt almost connected to the young woman, as if my waking was some kind of guardianship that I had been issued. Instinctively, I could watch her make her way down the road and feel a sense of relief flow through me when I saw her disappear through the door. 5 a.m. on the dot. This time I swung my legs over the side of the bed, as I always do. I shuffled to the window, as I always do, and I saw... 6 a.m. Still no sign of her. Oh well, maybe she had a day off. I've heard nasty cold has been going around. People don't always associate the crest of summer with snuffy noses and deep hoarse coughs, but those bugs are still there. I wish I could have known someone was looking out for me. A voice came from the opposite corner of my room. A voice so cold and so lifeless it froze me into place. My heart was pounding in my chest. I slowly began to turn my head to look over my shoulder. Soon the window entered my peripheral vision, and I was looking directly at her. She looked almost translucent. Light from the window was still hitting her face, but there was no shadow. Her skin was crystal white. Her hair was now a dull in color, and her eyes were piercing blue. A wide band of redness encompassed the circumference of her neck. I wish I would have known someone was looking out for me, she repeated. Her voice was cold. I wouldn't have felt so lonely. End of story. Story number 65. AITA for pranking my 241F boyfriend after he, 25M, pranked me many times before. Written by Juz21947. My boyfriend and I have a great, easygoing relationship. He pranks me all the time. His most common joke is hiding behind the door to jump scare me. Just last week he snuck into the bathroom to surprise me while I'm showering. All good fun. 3 days ago, I decided to get back at him. Well, he was sleeping. I grabbed the handcuffs we used for his sexy times, and I cuffed him to the bed. He woke up with right after a huge smile on his face, thinking that we were going to get naughty. He didn't expect me to take out a handsaw from the garage. "Babe, watch this," I said. I put the hacksaw right to my throat and started slashing away. So much blood poured out of me, you wouldn't believe it. It splattered on his face, and he looked like he came straight out of a horror movie. I was having a hoot, sawing my head off, and he was just screaming and screaming. It took me a while, but when I was done, I did a little dance holding my head up to try and calm him down. That was just one of our things. He liked to dance while joking around. I think I danced around for 10 minutes, with me holding the head by the hair in one hand and the hacksaw in the other. He just screamed the entire time. I tried to tell him that it was okay, that this was just a joke or whatever. Nothing worked. He would not stop screaming. Finally, I put my head back on and tried to kiss him. He pulled away really harshly. I have to admit, that hurt a little. That was 3 days ago. Since then, he kept trying to make me let him go. I can't. I love him too much. We're meant to be together, I know it. I've been taking care of him since then, though. Don't worry. I feed him nice treats. I clean him up when he, relieves himself. I've done all the things, but he still won't talk to me properly. I know he'll lighten up eventually, but sometimes he calls me these hurtful names like monster or demon or whatever. It makes me think I did something wrong when all I've done is try and make him smile. So, Reddit, am I a jerk? End of story. Story number 66, A Game for the Lonely, written by Pingus Pingus. This game is played alone in the dark hours of the night, when the area around your house or apartment is so lightless that you can't see more than a stone's throw out of your window. First, make an effort to become aware of your mind and body's current state. Ask yourself if you're afraid. Is your pulse higher than normal? Your pupils dilated? Your hands quivering? If any of these apply, which would not at all be surprising when all alone this late at night, it is not recommended that you proceed, as it may have severe effects on the game and its consequences. Once you are ready to begin, it's important that you unlock your door. Do not be afraid, there is nobody on the other side of it. You are completely safe during this stage of the game, and these instructions are written with your safety in mind. Next, slowly, calmly walk through your residence, one room at a time, turning all the lights on. Do not be afraid. There is nobody in there with you. It's important that you don't let paranoia creep in. The reason for this will become apparent soon. Once you've turned on all the lights, indeed confirming that nobody is there with you, approach the window. Stay calm as you open the curtains and blinds. Again, do not be afraid as you stand fully illuminated by the light and visible from the outside. Let the light comfort you as it proves that nobody is in the room with you. It is important that you follow the rules to the letter from here on, that you remain unafraid. Stare into the oppressive darkness and imagine an entity appear just out of sight. Whatever you do, do not be afraid. If something were standing out there, looking in at you from just far enough away out of the light wouldn't reach it, what would it look like? Breathe deeply, and keep your calm as you imagine the vague shape of its face, its eyes, its nose, its mouth. If it even has it all, or any of those, it is important that you are not afraid, so that your fear doesn't shape the entity out there for you. Now, in your head, repeat these words. It's been there the whole time. I just didn't notice it before. Quickly step away from the window and lock your door. It is now okay to be afraid. End of story. Story number 67. My Two Moms, written by Hot-Blooded 1988. Billy Parker, English, Grade 3, Mrs. Brillhart, My Two Moms. I have two moms. I used to have a mom and a dad, but my dad is in heaven now. The truck fell on him when he was fixing it. At the funeral, I met my new mom. My new mom is happy. She smiles and always lets me do what I want. She doesn't hug or kiss me, but that's okay. My sad mom cries a lot, but hugs me a lot too. Sad mom told me that happy mom likes to play tricks, so I need to be careful. One night, I almost slipped down the stairs. Happy mom had put oil on the top step and left a light bulb at the bottom. Sad mom also told me to only eat food that she was eating. That's why I didn't eat the chili dogs Happy Mom made me for breakfast. I gave those to my dog. My dog is in heaven with my dad now. Sad Mom gave me a bunch of food to keep in my room and to eat, and gave me a key to my room to lock it at night. Happy Mom can be forgetful. One time, Happy Mom and we were going to a toy store and put me in the car in the garage, but said she forgot something, so she went back inside. The garage was smoky, and I got bored waiting, so I went inside. I asked about getting a toy. Happy Mom said I was the man of the house, so gave me my dad's gun. She told me I could play with it, even though Dad said I should never touch it. I keep it in my toy box. I can watch TV in the bathtub. Happy Mom put the TV on the edge of the tub and told me to watch cartoons while taking a bath. I asked Sad Mom why Happy Mom likes to play tricks. She hugged me and told me that Happy Mom didn't ever want to be married and have kids. She said that if I hugged her really, really hard, that it would make her better. I hugged her so hard that she cried. After school today, I'm going to go learn how to swim. Happy Mom said the hug worked and no more tricks. She will take me to the lake today. She says I can jump right in and swim. I love my moms. The end. End of story. Story number 68. I Wish We Did This More, written by HorrorBoy1. It was our first meal together for years. Steaks, mine mid-rare, his on the wrong side of pink for me. We'd had a colourful past, me and my brother. But we were here, eating together at the same table, just like old times. It's all I wanted. Years back, when we were 8 and 10, we walked up and down our neighbourhood every weekend, every day after school. My ages 12 and 14, he'd fallen in with the wrong crowd, and I'd followed. One particularly hot summer's day, we went out in shorts and a vest, and I had my first score, and so began the decline of my life. Before that day, we sat together and had dinner every night, steaks on Saturday, and it was never the same after the first score. We didn't say much. It was so strange after so long. We just sat and ate and enjoyed the company. He struggled to look me in the eyes. Back when he had first gotten into the law, 28 at the time, I showed up at his door well past midnight, 26, stuttering, mumbling, hi. Well, I don't remember this, but I was told. I stumped against his door and gently passed out as he denied me entry into his house. He'd already tried everything. So that's why this meal meant so much. After such a long time, to be sitting here with him, nothing could ruin it. And then I heard the jingle of the keys. Warden says time's up, gotta go, the guard said as he swung open my cell door. It was our first meal together for years, and, it was my last. End of story. Story number 69. Jigsaw, the 300,000 contest, written by Sad Math Textbook. So my friend got me a puzzle. She didn't say how many pieces it was, but the box was bigger than my entire torso. It's your birthday, she said. I thought you might like this. The first thing I noticed was it was unwrapped, and it wasn't an actual puzzle box. It didn't have a picture on the front, didn't show the amount of pieces, or the "this is a choking hazard" warning. It was just a normal cardboard box, kind of heavy, sealed with a silvery duct tape. Here was writing on the side. I couldn't read it. It was small and in cursive. I figured it was a happy birthday type message. Everyone's had the idea to start with the edges, right? So I started with the edges. Finding edge pieces was one of the hardest things I'd done in my life. Maybe one in every 150 pieces I picked up when sifted through would be an edge. It took me 3 weeks to get my first edge. 500 pieces. Another 3 weeks to get another edge. 600 pieces, and there was nearly nothing in the base of it. The pieces were black and the barest hints of texture. I worked at the puzzle. I stopped leaving my house for groceries. I drank water from the sink, and when that stopped coming, I opened up the window and collected rainwater. I don't think I ate for weeks at a time. I was so consumed with the puzzle. It sustained me, whispering into my ear, "Keep going, almost done. There's a reason I chose you." The puzzle was my life. The puzzle was me. It took months, then years. It had been 3 birthdays since I'd gotten the puzzle. 5. 8. My phone stopped ringing, my stomach stopped grumbling, my electricity stopped coming. Finally, I finished the puzzle. After 10 long years, I was done. 300,000 pieces, and I was done. 10 years of no interactions, no electricity, barely any food, and I was done. A black, shapeless humanoid form was depicted. It had eyes on its head and on its hands. There were scrawlings that looked ancient around the sides. I wasn't sure what it was supposed to be. I stared at the puzzle, expecting something more. The puzzle stared back at me, and then it blinked. End of story. Story number 70. Coincidence. Written by One Cupped. February 1st, 2019. There's a certain part of the year where every single child gets taken in my neighborhood. Police have been investigating this for 5 years, ever since the first child was abducted. I still remember those kids' names. Harry was the first victim. Aaron soon came missing a year later. Paul came after that, and then came Philip. This year's kid is yet to be discovered. There are many theories as to why the kids have been missing. We live in a place where kids can easily get taken. It's a simple neighborhood with plenty of trees and parks, which is why it is understandable why killers and abductors usually pick this place as their spot. Many have claimed it to be the work of people harvesting kids' organs. It even goes as far as people believing in alien abduction. March 29th, 2019. Today is March 29th, the day when a kid finally goes missing. Smart parents, of course, hide their children for the whole day to avoid them going missing. Newcomers, however, don't know about the event, and some don't believe in such stories. If you were a parent, you would also not inform newcomers of the stories so as to increase the likelihood of their kid getting taken instead. But boy, were they wrong. March 30th, 2019. Yvonne, that was the name of the kid that was taken yesterday. She belonged to Linda and Amanda Deal, the great neighbors who lived there for 20 years. They had Yvonne locked up in the house, but sadly, it didn't work. The police had been searching all day, everywhere. All the neighbors helped and looked everywhere, but they still couldn't find her. They disappoint. I guess I will be able to smile happy birthday with the kids' names after all. All I need is 8 more years. Happy birthday to me. End of story. Story number 71. At the bottom of the stairs. Written by shouts from both sides. My wife is away at a conference for the weekend. She goes to a few of these every year for her work, so I'm used to having the house by myself for a few days. My typical M.O. while she's gone entails pizza, late-night gaming, and even later-night horror films. My only other companion in the house for the weekend is our dog, Gimli. Gim is a black and grey giant schnauzer, and he's the best dog to share the house with. He never barks or freaks out. He's calm, he listens well, and he's a big softie. Or, he was. Last night, things changed. I had just gotten out of the shower and was getting ready to go to bed when I heard a noise from downstairs. The noise froze my blood in place. I'd never heard anything like it. It sounded like a wet, violent crunch. As I stood there, it dawned on me that Gimli wasn't in bed in the corner of our room. So it must have been him making the noise. Reassured by this, though not really sure of what the hell could have gotten him to make that noise, I wedged towards the staircase to peer down into the living room. I was relieved to see Gimli's silhouette there, at the base of the stairs, looking up at me from the dimly lit entryway. I gave a whistle, my nighttime signal for it time to go to bed. He raised his head, but he didn't move. He usually trots up the stairs immediately after the whistle, but not this time. I called his name, said, "Time for bed, Gim." But still, he stood there, head up, paused on the first step, body stretched out with a slide behind the banister. That's when I heard the noise again, closer and more disgustingly wet this time. I was pretty freaked out by the scary movie binge that I had just said, frick it, and noped back into my room. Told myself it would be fine to laugh about it in the morning, but at the time, I was way too freaked out. So, I went to bed. I heard the crunch once more, but then drifted off to sleep with the bedroom door firmly locked. This was last night. I woke up and checked downstairs. I'm going to throw up. Grim is dead. He's in pieces at the bottom of the stairs. His lower half is missing. His upper half. Jesus effing Christ. It's been hollowed out. The flesh has been ripped out. The whole upper body is missing its insides. It's just skin and fur. I think whatever the frick did this was wearing him on the stairs last night. End of story. Story number 72. Please send help. Written by Emu Fred. Operator Jill, 911, what's the emergency? Unknown? Yes, hello, please send help. There is something in my house, and I think it hurt my mom. Operator Jill, okay, what's your name and address? Iona, my name is Iona, and my last name is Teller, 1160 Goldale Boulevard. Operator Jill, okay, Iona, did you see the intruder's place? Iona, no, I ran back into my room when I saw my mom on the floor with her footsteps. I'm sorry, I didn't know what else to do. Operator Jill, it's okay, Iona. It was very smart and mature of you to call 911. Just stay online with me, okay? Stay hidden where you are. Iona, okay, I won't move. Operator Jill, now Iona, I need you to be a big boy and answer some very important questions. Can you do that for me? Iona, I'll try. Operator Jill, what is today's date? Check your phone on Iona. Iona, it's March 28th, 2019. Operator Jill, very good. Now, what is the exact time? Iona, it says 1:38 p.m. Operator Jill, I see. Another one. Iona, I don't want to die. I don't want to lose my mom. Operator Jill. Iona, please send help. Operator Jill. Iona, based on your location, it should be 3:42 a.m., the middle of the night. Iona, East Ned Lap. Operator Jill, I'm sorry, Iona, but I won't be able to dispatch help to your location. Unknown, Apasaya descend for hell. Call disconnected. Great, now they're mimicking children. A lot of good people in both the force and hospitals have gone missing after dispatch from these, copycats. They've just recently learned how to accurately tell the date. I can only hope that they don't get the time right, too. End of story. Story number 73. Because the alternative is too horrible to comprehend. Written by Nicanova. 7 billion people in the world, and patient zero happened to be my baby boy. I hear the crowd's silent stares outside my house, and the sirens wailing in the distance. The evening sky mimics fire and its heat, its color, and complete disregard of life. The shovel strikes the ground once more. It is a lot harder than a skull, but doesn't smell quite as bad. I try to look away as I dump. Yes, I wanted to lower his body ceremonially into the grave, but, you try holding onto your son's corpse. I dumped his body into the grave, unable to touch his graying skin a moment longer than I needed to. There was a muffled splat. At what point in time does a toddler turn into a zombie when both can't form proper thought? At what point does holding the deceased become hugging a corpse? And at what point will exhuming the grave of Patient Zero be an archaeological expedition instead of, grave robbing? The police were no doubt on their way, but I knew that they would try and cover this up. They had already given me pills that stopped my visions. I looked back down at my hands. They're covered in grey smears, not dissimilar to the makeup that children often wore during Halloween. Zombie's essence had come off in my hands. My son had become a zombie, and I know that it's true. I had killed a zombie, Patient Zero no less. I am a hero. I am a hero. I am a hero, and this will be my story until the day that I die. End of story. Story number 74. My Turn, written by Storm Hunter X. No, son, you need to stand in line. When all the other kids are done, you can play too. My father was a good man, even though he didn't have to be. In a small town like ours, the church pastor was no less than God, and the people of the town adored Pastor Jonathan Mosby, the perfect man whose only weakness was a deathly allergy to peanuts. He adopted me at the age of 4, and after my parents killed themselves, the mysterious, unsolved disappearances of my sister was too much for them to stomach. He gave me a good life, raised me never to take advantage of others, even though the other parents would pull their kids out of the line to let the pastor's son play on the swing first. He never allowed it. My name used to be Timothy Cinders, but I now went by the name Jack Mosby. No use holding on a name given to me by people who abandoned me. The only place in town I wasn't allowed to go to was the basement. He had stained baseball bat hung over the door, and he'd made me promise never to go down there. He always said, "Son, after I pass, you'll have to take care of the whole place. You can go down there then. Do whatever you want. You'll get your turn." Well, I obliged for a while, but an 18-year-old with nothing to do makes bad decisions, especially when said 18-year-old's guardian was out of the town for 3 days. I knew where he hid the key, so I easily got in. Well, let's just say I didn't expect to know what I'd find. There were sets of shackles on all 4 walls, and a gorgeous naked woman was shackled to them. Well, most of them anyway. Some of them were rotting carcasses already. Above each woman there was an engraving on the wall. Shania Williams, Daniela Samuels, Dorothy Deacon, Pamela Holm, Vanessa Cinders, right over one of the most disfigured corpses in the room. I ran back upstairs, locked the room, and placed the key back where it was supposed to be. I have no idea how I hatched a plan, even when my head was pounding recklessly, but I hatched one, and a bloody good one at that. When Father came back home, I welcomed him warmly. I made him a sumptuous lunch for both of us, turkey sandwiches. As he dug in, he recognized the taste of peanuts immediately, but it was already too late. Anaphylactic shock. What a way to go. After I checked his pulse, I took out the key and went back downstairs, and I made sure to pick up the blood-stained baseball bat before I did. My turn. End of story. Story number 75. Runner, written by Water-Filled Mugs. She is breathless as she pushes through the masses of marathoners. Her mind forges her forward. She relishes in the heartbeat of her neck, the wind and heaven against her face, and she ignores the tired groans behind her. Her goal is clearer than ever before. She can almost taste the victory. She takes stride after ragged stride and forgets the first stage of infection as hallucination. End of story. Story number 76. The Quiet Village, written by Aita. Have you ever known true hatred? I have. From the earliest memories, I remember knowing that everyone in my village hated me. I didn't even blame them. As the bastard son of a lady of the evening, I understood their scorn. They hated me, and I returned their hatred 100-fold. One day, the universe decided to repay me for all the suffering that they had inflicted. It happened so slowly that I didn't notice it at first, nor did they. They joked, they laughed, they mocked me as usual. Yet, as one day wore on, their jokes slowed, their laughing became sedate, and finally, a worry finally crossed their faces. They were stilled, entirely locked in time. It was alone in a world of statues. I am not an evil man. I didn't immediately begin to rejoice in their misfortune. I spent weeks trying to wake them, to have anyone I used to know come back to me. But despite my efforts, they remained frozen, trapped in a single moment. And so, eventually, my old hatreds emerged. I never meant them to, but with no one to hold me in check, I one day found myself screaming at my old tormentors. Everything that I wanted to say for years come flowing out, shouting into the unmoving faces. And once that wall, that hesitant to reveal my contempt for them all, finally came down, the fervor advanced rapidly. I started telling them all what I thought of them, screaming my loathing at them, contenting me for time, without their contemptible voices speaking over me. I was able to finally say what I'd always wanted, but that only satisfied me briefly. Soon I was striking them, emphasizing each word with a blow to the face and body, and even then, though they stood locked in place, I imagined I could see the pain in their eyes, a tiny shadow of the hurt that they'd inflicted on me over the years. Beatings eventually gave way to true retribution. Whatever I could find I used on them, repaying emotional torment with physical. For every word that they'd put in my soul, I put 100 on their bodies. The people who'd shamed me suffered, and those who'd rejected me could reject me no more. I was a god of the unmoving. I don't know how many years I had to enact my revenge, but I do know that I repaid them many times over for their hatred. Yet I am left with one question. Was it worth it? That's what haunts me, as I feel myself begin to slow, as I watch their limbs begin to move for the first time in an eternity. Their lungs begin to breathe, their hearts begin to beat, their life begins to resume. In these last moments, as I recall my hatred repaid 100-fold on them, and look into their eyes, I begin to understand what true hatred is, and I wonder, will they show me the mercy that I didn't? End of story. Story number 77, Blackout, written by Stipe19. Sometimes I get these, I call them blackouts. The last thing I remember today was going out for a bicycle ride. It was around 5 p.m. and it was sunny and warm outside. Suddenly, it was dusk, standing alone in the forest. Not sure where I am, but it looks like a forest near my city. So tired. So frickin' tired. I look at my hands. Is that blood? But it's not mine. I'm not hurt. I'm starting to shake, hyperventilating. It happened again. It fricking happened again. End of story. Story number 78. False Bottom, written by UN Owen. 1605. Hi. I'm alive for what it's worth. Sorry to worry you all. I can only imagine what you've had to deal with. I know I'm a jerk for up and leaving like I did, but there was something I had to do. I'm in Peru. Wait, before you say something, give me a minute. 1635. Sorry, I just, do you remember back in 3rd grade how I used to tell you I couldn't sleep at night because Danny wouldn't stop crying? Crap, do you even remember Danny? Does anyone? This all started when I visited his parents. The way that they behaved and the way the house looks, you'd have never guessed that they'd even had another son. But I know. I remember Danny. 714. Okay, do you remember the box? No way you would have forgotten about that. The day we found it in my attic was like Christmas. Even thinking about it today is still sends shivers down my spine. Of course, not in a way that it did before. How could we have ever learned to put it away and just live normally? I mean, I know how I did. Gonna assume that you just forgot about it after all, or something. But, you have to remember, there was the stuffed toy, a dusty bear that we found lying in the corner. You said it was cute, that we should have saved it for later. So we put it in the box and shut the lid. Do you remember when we reopened it? 1748. Well, 1753. Do you? 1802. It was gone. We did the same thing again with a pencil and a ruler, I think. My grandpa's watch. The box made things disappear. And so I thought. 1854. Frick. 1911. And so one night I couldn't sleep because Danny was crying again, and I had to test the next morning, and I was really tired and angry. I didn't think so. I went over to his crib, and he was small enough to fit in with the fricking thing, and, 1927. Frick, frick, frick. I was so scared. Mom cried so much and Dad yelled, and the police was everywhere, and they asked me questions, and how the frick was I supposed to tell them? 1942. I'm sorry. I'm so freaking sorry. 2011. While I was at my parents', I found the box again. I put a photo of Danny in it. I don't know why, but maybe I Maybe I just wanted to relive it and remind myself of what I'd done. Or maybe I figured it'd be some sort of closure on my own fricked-up way. But then 2 days later, I was browsing the news and there was this report of a strange photo falling from the sky in the middle of a random town in Peru, and I just had to go and see it myself. 2053. I've tested it several times now. Nobody could survive the fall from that height. 21. Goodbye. I'm sorry. End of story. Story number 79. The Ledge, written by Certain Shadows. You don't want to do this, I yelled as I leaned out of the office window, but the man remained where he stood on the building's ledge, the tips of his shoes peering over the concrete. He gazed down numbly at the throng of spectators congregating on the ground below. Many were filming him. You don't understand, he replied sadly. It's over. She left me. He was close enough to be within my grasp. I slowly reached towards him, thinking he was too immersed in his anguish to notice me. I was wrong. Stop that, he shouted, and shakily inched further away from me. I shrank back. Already the crowd had swollen in number, and many more had gathered to watch the gruesome end of an unraveled man. I knew it would be just a matter of time before the cops arrived. I prayed that they'd be accompanied by a negotiator far more trained than myself. Listen, man, I pleaded. I know we've never met before. I'm just a night janitor who went to clean your office and saw the window open. But I can tell you from this framed photo on your desk that you've got people you love. Are those 2 girls your daughters? He nodded. How do you think they'll feel when they never come home from work? I spoke every word in a calm, even tone, though inwardly I was panicking. Don't you think doing this would hurt them for the rest of their lives? Man began to cry. Look, I get it, I continued, never taking my eyes off of him. I'm divorced myself. It's hard, but it doesn't have to be the end of the world. Your kids still need you here. I reached for him again. This time he didn't back away. Come on, I said encouragingly. I won't let you fall. He hesitated and then slowly began inching closer to the window. I was so absorbed in the moment that I never even heard the office door open. Just as his fingertips grazed against mine, I felt someone place a hand on my shoulder and roughly pulled me away. Startling, the man on the ledge lost his balance. No! I yelled, but it was too late. He already began to fall. His terrified scream meshed with those of the horrified onlookers. I'll never forget the pulpy sound of his body hitting the ground. I turned around and locked eyes with the cop, tears streaming down my face. Why did you do that? I demanded, my voice trembling, my grief and rage. I had him. He shook his head solemnly. No, you didn't. Last night he climbed onto the ledge of another building and threatened to jump. A man fell to his death trying to save him. An unsettling sense of confusion washed over me. I don't understand. You weren't going to put him back inside through the window, the cop replied gravely. He was going to pull you out of it. End of story. Story number 80. Tying the Knot, written by Soapy Ribnaut. Louise breathed in deeply. This was the big day, and she was reciting the age-old wedding mantra, and her late mother had always drummed into her. Something old. I clasped her mother's engagement ring to her chest. It was the only thing of real value, both material and sentimental, that she had left behind. Something new. She'd spent a majority of her inheritance on the dress and shoes as they glided down the aisle of the church. She shed a tear for her beloved parents who would never get to see this day. Something borrowed. Although not strictly borrowed, she had not paid for the poison, nor the lipstick that protected her from its effects. She mentally apologized to her parents for the slight detour from the poem, but felt that they approved nonetheless. Something blue. After the vicar had given them permission to kiss, she watched as her groom change color. Again, there was a slight divergence from the poem, as this was more of a purple color, but once again, she could sense her parents' approval. Hopefully, they would be watching down as she finally gained retribution on the hit-and-run driver who'd stolen them from her. End of story. Story number 81. You Don't See Them, written by Cap on Breath. You're pathetic blind fools. You don't see them. They are watching you from the shadows. They are lusting after you, your warmth, your vitality, your blood, your souls. You don't see them, but you choose not to see me. All that you see is a vagrant, a homeless bum, dirty, unkempt hair and wild eyes. Best not make eye contact with the filthy creature. He will want our food, our money, or worse, he'll want to try and talk to us. God forbid, and if you stop to talk, stop to listen. I see them lick your lips and cruel teeth as they plot against you with dark and terrible intentions. I've tried to warn you, but you don't listen as well as don't see. I whisper about them as you pass. Watch out, I hiss, and you jump and speed up, desperate to get away from me. It's not me you need to fear. I've tried shouting to alert you to them. I stripped naked and screeched, "The devils are in the shadows. They are coming for you. They are coming for all of us. They will drink your blood and devour your souls. They will take your little girl." I pointed to the passing family. It did no good. They locked me away and hurt me. Today I will make you see. I'm standing in a square, jagged metal in hand. You pass all around me, the invisible force field of my squalor and my madness keeping you at bay. I shout my warning one last time. The devils are in the shadows are here for you. Flee while you can. The blood will draw them, and they're here for the blood. My long life on the cruel streets have taught me pain. Even so, I could never have imagined the searing agony of tearing off my flesh. My shouts of wet and red gurgle now. Around me you may scream, most of you backing away from the scene. But one brave soul rushes forward to help. Her hand over my gaping, ruined throat, she tries to soothe me. "It's okay," she says. "Somebody call an ambulance," she pleads. I grip her wrist. "The shadows," I whisper to her. "What can you see in the shadows?" She looks up, confused, then her eyes widened in terror. She sees them. When I die, with a heavy heart, I always hoped that they were just in my mind. End of story. Story number 82. Every 10 minutes. Written by a man called True. Check your watch. Count off the seconds in your head. You're not really seeing all of those seconds, you know. Your brain doesn't work that fast. It's taking snapshots of the world and sorting them together after the fact. Your brain is a few milliseconds behind what's actually happening. This is a scale that you can't actually perceive. So to you, it's not a problem. But to them, it is. They watch you right now, waiting for an opening. Your brain refreshes too fast for them to act, so they have to wait. If they moved now, the force of your perception would overwhelm them. They're too fragile for that. What you don't know, what scientists don't know, is that sometimes your brain has to stop and sort things through. It does so too fast for you to notice, but your brain has to reboot itself and clear out the files from the constant cut and paste job and does on the universe. That's their cue. The ones that watch and wait for a brief instant, slightly longer than the usual period, when your brain is open. It's different for everyone, but the brief shot is, on average, every 10 minutes. When it's time, they act. Have you ever had a period where you catch yourself and realize that for the last few minutes you were just staring into space? You think back on the last few minutes with an empty blur. Usually, you shrug it off and move on. Now, you may be wondering why this doesn't happen to you every 10 minutes. Sometimes they are too far away to take the shot, or too afraid of being caught when it ends. They wait for just the right moment. When the time comes, You come to a few minutes later, wondering where you went, and you feel a bit cold, a bit hungry, and they leave slightly heavier. End of story. Story number 83. The Day I Noticed I Had 6 Fingers on My Foot. Written by Lonely Chemist. The day I noticed that I had 6 toes, I was pooping, sat on the toilet, and I just bent over, compressing my belly. Then I saw it. I never thought of counting my fingers, and never noticed anything strange before. I am 27. During all my life, nobody else told me. But that day, there it was, another pinky on my left foot. I went absolutely crazy about it. I was overwhelmed with the thought that something else could be wrong with me. During my whole life, I never paid too much attention to my looks. But what if I was a monster, an ugly beast, and just didn't notice it? I did what everybody would do in my situation. I cut my 6th toe. It did hurt, I won't lie. I went through the whole lot of pain to get rid of the abomination. I used a garden shear, boiled in water, of course, to sterilize them. I was hoping to have a clean cut, but it was just too hard. Bones are stronger than you'd think, and even if you had drunk half a bottle of vodka, I couldn't stand the horrible agony. My bone made a terrible sound while crushing. My muffled scream was terrifying. I was biting and folded piece of clothing as my clenching teeth cut it in half. There was a lot of blood. I knew I had to stop it and cauterize the wound. I did it with fire. At that point, I think I lost consciousness for a few seconds, but when I woke up, everything was going to be okay again. My foot was finally normal. I just had to check every other aspect of myself just to make sure the rest was okay as well. I found a world of other imperfections and fall into an abyss of depression. I wasn't what I thought I was. Everything was wrong with me. Everything. I was a monster. I had a nostril bigger than the other, a slightly squint eye. My teeth were crooked, my chest concave. I was fat. So many errors I had to correct. And so I did. But now it's difficult to breathe and I can't see well. I think I'm almost perfect now. I don't really know because that's all I see is red. I've broken my sternum to repair my chest and my heart is now slowing down. I'm losing too much blood and the cut under my belly. Maybe I've removed something more than just fat. Don't even feel the pain at this point. I'm just tired. I think finally I can rest, sleeping in this perfect body. End of story. Story number 84. The Sheriff's Announcement, written by Vowed. Ladies and gentlemen, the sheriff reluctantly began his announcement from the podium. Something untangible was stuck in his windpipes, blocking what he had to say. He cleared his throat in an awkward attempt to regain his composure. I am extremely sorry, once again, to have to gather everyone here to announce our findings on the latest case of 13 missing children in our town. As a father of 2, I can only imagine the pain these have brought to your families, and please accept my condolences for your loss. He stopped. His words were engulfed by attention and silence in the room. A single whimper flared up and died out almost instantly. He knew their pain had been pushed over the limit of endurance. So, let us go straight to our findings. We would like to announce that the culprit has been captured, thanks to the locals' cooperation. We have traced the evidence to his hiding place and, He stopped again. Even the seemingly positive news couldn't do much to penetrate the viscous atmosphere of the room. A few eyebrows raised and a few heads dropped, and in their posture of giving up, they quietly lowered their gaze again, and then they knew the next part. Regrettably, we have found 13 headless bodies in his basement. Having anticipated the news, people in the room could not stop themselves from shivering at the horror of it. The words burst out of the floodgate wide open, and the uncontrollable sobbing simultaneously started. On top of the tragic ambience, the sheriff cleared his throat again, trying to muster the last of his courage to finish the announcement. We have also found, ladies and gentlemen, and there is no other way for me to put this to you, 13 children's heads and a chest freezer. He barely got his last words out before the room was flooded with screams, shouts, and sobs. The sounds rose up in a tsunami of anger and desperation. The man tried to hold on to their wives, and they embraced each other, trying to find some last drops of sanity and consolation. But, one word, a single syllable, was all it took to rein back all emotions and get everyone's attention. They stared in bewilderment at the podium, where the sheriff was strained and warped under the immense invisible weight of the news. But, ladies and gentlemen, the 13 heads did not match the 13 bodies. End of story. Story number 85. The Virus. Written by 297 Raspberries. Today was a good day. I had just finished running errands, and I was now on my way out of town, feeling the breeze and smelling the salty fresh air. It had been a while since I'd done this, since I was cooped up in quarantine all these days. The virus is finally diminishing, I whispered to the cool air. I can enjoy life again. Remembering being the only person to be not affected by the disease, since I took such tedious measures of self-isolation and safety. No one came near me or spoke to me for more than 3 years. I was happy and healthy and safe and warm. I headed home to sleep, snuggling beneath my comfortable sheets, enveloped by the softness of my mattress. No one can touch me now. I feel so safe and warm. The next morning, I'm excited and ready to start the new day. I get up and head to the kitchen and make myself a nice cup of coffee. It is very energizing, rich, and warm. Who would have thought how excited I was to take a shower and be ready for the day? I knew today was yet another day that I could go outside and feel the sun. Today was going to be breezy again, and warm. I knew that my job today was essential to the safety of the earth. The virus had destroyed much of it, and it was my honor to help it come back being a peaceful sanctuary. I was excited and warm. As I walked along the barren streets, I see my first task in the distance. Slowly, as to not be too loud, I sneaked up the road and positioned myself conveniently. Suddenly, I pounced, digging my fingers into her eyes, gouging out the holes in her brain and putting it out with my bare hands. The blood that dripped down my fingers was sweet, sticky, and warm. I sit there, smiling and panting, happy that the next piece of the virus was eradicated. I am one step closer to healing the world. In the distance, I hear yelling, "He's out! He's out! Oh my God! He killed her!" Her body is still warm. Now I am back in my home, softly nestled into the comforter that covers of the walls, floor, and ceiling. I heard I would be going back to isolation for another 3 years. The damn virus is back again. I will have to make more work on this in the future, so now I must get some rest. Good thing my snug blanket is wrapped around my arms. Good thing I am safe and warm. End of story. Story number 86. When you drop something, close your eyes. Written by Useful Idiot 118. There's probably been moments when you've dropped something and it seemed to fall out of existence. Those extra stocks, that ping-pong ball that rolled under the sofa, even that $5 you swore you just set down a few minutes ago. A few days ago, as I dropped a glass of water I was carrying in from the kitchen, I knew the shatter would be loud and sharp. I could only imagine the splintering of the glass as it hit the floor. My toes would feel the wet of the water, and perhaps the blood if the shards hit me. As a half a second passed, but when the glass hit the floor, there was nothing. There was the sound of a dry glass was gone. I glanced around the floor and under the kitchen table, but it was completely missing. I even looked at the dog to see if she had caught the glass, but she was in a mid-morning snooze by the window, unfazed. My curiosity got the better of me, and I grabbed another glass, one with the same kind, and before I filled it up with water, I went to the same spot and dropped the glass, expecting it to shatter like the first one hadn't. And it did. It shattered loudly, shards of glass diverging in patterns that would be considered pretty had it not been painful. My toes got cut and the water forced the blood to run quicker from the tiny wounds. The poor dog ran off to the bedroom, startled awake. Has something like this ever happened to you? You've just set something down, and it suddenly seemed gone for good. Perhaps it's another dimension, or perhaps a gate to hell opening for a slight moment, and maybe it's something we're not meant to witness. Ever since then, I've seen it happen. Things have started disappearing. I started with my phone, then my keys, then my microwave was gone on Wednesday. On Friday morning, I pet my dog goodbye, and by evening I was frantically searching for her, knowing that she was gone. My apartment has started to become bare. I've started to run out of things. Every time I look away, something else is gone. By the time I've finished typing this, I will know my room would have been nothing more than 4 walls. I'm holding a compact mirror, and I plan to stare at the computer for as long as I can. I don't know where I'm going to end up when I blink out of existence, but I know now what happened to all the missing people in the world. End of story. Story number 86. 5 stars, written by JTB685. 5 stars? Amazing. By Andy on June 11th, 2020. The secure lock smart video doorbell cam is perfect. 15 minutes to install and alerts get sent right to my phone. I can see who's at the front door, even while I'm at work. Top-notch product, recommending to all my friends. 4 stars. Useful product, but has some bugs. By Andy on June 23rd, 2020. A few weeks after installation, I started triggering alerts in the middle of the night when there was no one outside. Very frustrating, especially so late. Other than that, great product. Sounds and picture are crystal clear. Seller's response. Hi Andy, sorry to hear that you're having issues with the device. If you contact our support team, we will troubleshoot the error and see what we can do. All the best, Stefan from Secure Lock. 3 stars. Faulty, but they've offered a replacement. By Andy on June 27th, 2020. Has been nothing but trouble. Every night at 1:23 a.m. it sends me an alert when there's no one at the door. I've been on with their support team 5 times and they can't figure out what's going on. They've offered a replacement free of charge, so they've earned a few stars for professional customer support. 2 stars. 2 faulty cams in a row. By Andy on July 1st, 2020. The replacement is worse than the first. Alerts at 1:23 a.m. every night. And with the replacement, I'm seeing pixelation and weird visual bugs as well. Support team has no clue what the problem is, but refuse to admit it's the device. Outside of that, it's working well. Scared of some idiot kids trying to steal my packages. Bug is a big disappointment, though. 1 star. Replacement is worse than the first. Cam is broke and triggering non-stop. By Andy, July 6, 2020. Less than a week after purchasing, this replacement is completely broke. I'm now awake at 2 a.m. watching strange visual glitches on a cam getting spammed with alerts. I've had 40 since 1:23 a.m. 40! Currently on hold with technical support while requesting a refund. Seller's response. Hi Andy, sorry to hear about your issues, although I would like to stress that this is extremely rare for us to ship a faulty product. I appreciate that this doesn't help your current situation and how aggravating it must be. If you request a refund, I'll be happy to process it in a matter of top priority. I'd also like to offer a complimentary replacement. I requested a senior member of the support team reach out to you personally to troubleshoot this issue. Once again, I am very sorry for our product did not meet your expectations. All the best, Stefan from Secure Lock. Seller's response. Hi Andy, I noticed you haven't been responding to our support team's attempts to get in touch, and you haven't requested a refund. Are you still experiencing the issues on the device? Please let me know if there's anything we can do to help. All the best, Stefan from Secure Lock. End of story. Story number 88. Don't Look in Mirrors. Written by OMG, it's Val117. Just trust me. Don't look. It's not really something you think about. Maybe it's while brushing your teeth. Maybe fixing your hair. Maybe you want to see how nice you look in that new shirt. But one of those times, something might look wrong, feel wrong. A hair out of place, a slight change in eye color. But when you get close enough to see what it is, you're close enough for them to reach you. There won't be any pain. There won't be any sound. You won't even get a chance to scream. You'll get pulled through, and then that's it. All you can do now is look through the mirror all the time, every day, and all you'll be able to see is the thing that took your place. It'll wink at you, and all you'll be able to do is wink back. Don't look in the mirrors. End of story. Story 89. Boyfriend Acting Weird. Written by Saz4224. My boyfriend Jordan just has gotten back from the corner shop and is quite frankly, I'm scared. He's not been gone long, maybe 5 minutes max. I actually thought he'd taken some more time. He's a considerate kind, you see. Takes great care with things, even with something as simple as choosing the right soda. Anyway, he got back a few minutes ago with a vacant look in his eyes. I barely heard him come in, but he took great care in bolting and chaining the door, even using the extra lock switch. If I'm honest, neither of us usually bother with. He's in the kitchen now, looking at the knives. I've tried talking to him, asking him what on earth he's doing, but he won't reply. He's taken down the extra sharp one that we keep in the top of the cupboard, an unreadable expression on his face. I'm not taking any chances. I run and lock myself in the bathroom. I don't come out until I see the police car pull up outside. Weird. I hadn't called the police yet. I run straight out the door, and Jordan is nowhere to be seen now. The two policemen stand side by side. I am so sorry, miss. Your partner has been stabbed and killed. It happened just up the road from here. We caught the guy pretty quick. He had Jordan's possessions on him, including his key, and was circling the flat. Well done for bolting the door, ma'am. That may have well saved your life. I looked back at the knife still on the table, taking from the shelf that I could never reach. End of story. Story number 90. Nothing Special. Written by Paper Toss Trash Can 45. You're nothing special, he said. He was right. I was not. You're boring as hell, he added. I nodded. He was correct. Guys like me usually go for beautiful girls, but everything about you is boring. Your clothes, your job, your house, your cereal. He went through my cereal cabinet. He broke into my house and went through my cereal cabinet. Even your attic is so boring. No cool stuff in there at all. I glanced over to the plain, taped-up cardboard boxes. I loved my boring, uncomplicated life. He leaned over, glaring at me, and whispered, But I'm going to light a fire under your rear and make sure that no one ever forgets you. Everyone will know your name and where you lived. They will be extremely interested in you. I shook my head, but could not get the words out of my mouth. I wanted my life to stay boring. He let the kerosene-soaked rag under the chair that he had tied me to and ran. I couldn't scream because of the kerosene rag stuffed in my mouth, and couldn't move because of the one tied to my hands. He was right. It was all over the news. My neighbors gawked at the burnt-down remains of my house. Everyone knew the name of the woman who burned to death in her attic. It became an urban legend of sorts. What they didn't know was the name of the corpses in my basement. No one expected that. Had that dumb crap just opened up the basement door or ripped the tape off those nondescript boxes instead of rummaging through my fricking cereal, he'd know why I tried to never draw attention to myself. In death, I gathered the interest I worked so hard to avoid in life. I miss my boring life. End of story. Hope in the Apocalypse, written by Spectre 10. I was sitting on the soft snow with a blanket over my shoulders. I looked around warily before turning on my flashlight. You never knew when some of them could see you, even deep into the woods. I aimed the beam of light towards my pack and, after some rummaging, pulled out a notebook. The pages were all wrinkled and falling out from the constant use. I didn't write anything special in the book, just the days since the crap hit the fan. I thought about the small boy ripped apart with the bare hands. They laughed as they used his intestines to strangle his mother, who wouldn't listen as I called to her that it was too late. I shook my head as I rid myself of the thoughts. I looked back at the notebook, and with a quick scrawl I wrote 601. It was how many days had gone by since I last saw someone that wasn't one of them. God, I'm so alone. I snapped the notebook shut and put it away, and I knew that my light had been on for too long. I clicked it off and rolled in my sleeping bag. I couldn't risk a fire. This was going to be a cold night. I ventured into town early the next day. If you went in early, you avoided confronting them. Walking through the empty streets, I saw half a man skewered on a flagpole. This was nothing new. I kept walking, vapors and garbage fluttering amongst my feet. I was peering into the window fronts, hoping to find something, anything that wasn't tainted by them. And I stopped. I saw her from across the street, hiding in the back of a small store, hiding from their prying eyes. She was my answer. Oh, Lord, please let it be. I don't want to be alone anymore. I had to get to her before one of them noticed her. Cautiously, painstakingly, I crept towards the window of the small shop, ignoring the bloody handprints that dragged along its walls. I slowly peeked into the window, and I saw her. She was beautiful. She was the end of my loneliness, a beacon in a life that was now a hell. This is what hope felt like. I didn't see the empty bucket underfoot until it was too late. With a loud rattle, it fell over and rolled down the street, clamoring all the way. Instantly, the town was abuzz with life. They started to hoot with glee as they ran at me. I shuddered. One never got used to the sight of it. I didn't think about my safety, though. I needed to get to her. They stopped as they saw me dive through the window of the shop, reaching towards her. They smiled, but I didn't care as I grabbed her and stuck her cold barrel in my mouth. This is it. This is the end of my loneliness, my suffering. I pulled the trigger, and nothing happened. End of story. Story number 92. Cockroaches are hard to kill. Written by Potato Curry. Ever wondered how cockroaches have managed to survive on Earth for over 300 million years? They are extremely intelligent animals and hard to kill. When you step on one in the bathroom and it appears dead, it's actually not. Its legs may be broken, its guts may have spilled out, and its exoskeleton may have been crushed, but as long as its heart is still beating, it is not dead. And when you flush the broken body down the toilet, it is still very much alive. The roach makes its way down your pipes and into your home septic tank. There it eats at all the organic matter, your poop and other waste particles over the course of several days. With an abundant source of nutrition, its body heals back quickly. And the cockroach is very intelligent. It remembers where it used to live. It remembers the flavor of your poop that has been eating for several days. It remembers your toilet. And by any means, the roach wants to return there. The cockroach is an excellent swimmer and can hold its breath for 40 minutes. It easily swims back up the same pipes that you flushed it down. It scuttles out of your toilet and back into your house. It wants more poop to eat. It remembers that delicious flavor all too well. And in the middle of the night, it searches everywhere in your house to try and find more of it. The roach finds you sleeping peaceably in your bedroom. It knows the source of the food is in your anus, and the roach wants more food. The next time you're lying in bed and you feel your butt itch, just know that that is not a normal itch. It's a cockroach climbing into your bunghole. End of story. Story number 93. An Even Trade, written by Chesney. I was murdered in the summer I turned 17. A local rich man lured me into his Lamborghini, and I was too naive to know a trap when I saw one. All it took was 2 minutes and a garrote, and my life was over. But, I didn't leave. My spirit lingered, even after he cut into tiny pieces and stuck my heart into a little plastic bag before shoveling dirt over my body. I languished in a cage made of my own bones for years, my rage growing with each passing second. Slowly, bit by bit, I began to gain power, my anger transforming into spectral energy. 10 years after my murder, my spirit rose from the dense grass covering my makeshift grave, eager for payback. I knew I couldn't just let the world know what he'd done. His family was insanely wealthy and well-connected. They would ship their little boy off overseas at the slightest hint of trouble. I had to sever that connection first. I found him nestled in a nice $1 million home in the hills with a wife and 2 bratty kids. I began sneaking into his room, night after night, whispering evil nothings into his ear and showing him images of my body in varying states of decay. It didn't take long for him to snap. First, it was the alcohol, then the hard drugs. His business suffered, and the board had decided that he should quietly put his resignation in. Hushed whispers about therapy, medications, and mental hospitals passed from parent to child at siblings and cousins, but none of it worked. I made sure it didn't. Finally, an outburst of his nephew's wedding snapped the last remaining string. He was out of the world, out of their lives, and out of their protection. I had him where I wanted him. The rest was easy. A little divine inspiration from the detective working my cold case led her right to where I was buried. She was one clever lady, and once she had me, she was able to connect the rest of the dots, leading her right to my killer's crappy apartment door. He went with her without a fuss and confessed everything in full. His collection of trophies was found in the basement of his old home, much to his ex-family's mortification. It seemed like I wasn't his only kill. It was mostly worth the pain and suffering to see him break down in court, weeping like I had been when I begged for my life. He went away for life, but mercifully for him, he was murdered when a gen popped not long after his arrival. Only the priest was present at his funeral. His final resting place was a tiny pauper's grave, with only his first name etched in a nondescript stone. In the end, it was an even trade. He stole my heart, and I stole his last name. End of story. Story number 94. The Three-Eyed Angel. Written by Manon Lycett. Unto the world was born a three-eyed angel, with one eye that could see the past, one eye that could see the present, and one eye that could see the future. On the first day, locals assembled to watch the angel open his eye to the past. He saw all the horrors that had endured and caused, the bloodshed, the murders, the gas showers, the pointless abuse, and the centuries of strife. He shed a single tear for every victim, until he cried so many tears the eye rotted away. On the second day, the word had spread to the nearby villages, and they joined the locals as they witnessed the angel opening his eye to present. He saw the wars in the Middle East, the famine in the South, and the corruption and the greed. Once he'd seen it all, he sewed his eyes shut, so it would never open again. On the final day, a crowd of thousands had amassed at the gates to watch the three-eyed angel as he opened the eye to the future. It took only an instant before the angel shrieked, swung its hand, and gouged its eye out. End of story. Story number 94. When your wife wants to go to her parents' house, you should just go. Written by Adina. I've never cared about football, but Mike insisted we put up on the Saints-Falcons game. He'd been quiet for a bit, can't blame him, the Falcons are losing, but we still sat there. Mike in his Falcons jersey, Tom in his gold, and me in my black. I think at this point we were just watching it out of the stubbornness. Kate and Mike had a huge fight because she wanted to see her parents and he wanted to watch that crappy team. So Kate stormed out, taking the car and leaving us with Mike, him slouched on his only chair, Tom and me on the floor pretending to follow the game. Kate must have taken the food with her because we can't find the turkey. Mike had been snacking on the wing earlier but refused to share, even after we begged. We haven't eaten since Kate fed us breakfast, and we would have killed for some turkey. Mike's phone was just been ringing for a bit, but we couldn't reach it. The game ended and Mike didn't move. The TV kept playing, telling us about Black Friday deals. At this point, all we wanted was to get some food. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I knew, it was morning. I heard Tom chomping on something, so maybe he found some turkey after all. I ran towards Tom, my tail wagging, and he couldn't believe my eyes. Tom was chewing on some thigh, but it wasn't turkey. By the time Kate came back on Saturday, Tom's gold coat was stained with red streaks and my black coat wasn't doing much better. Kate's screams were only drowned out by the sirens from the EMTs. I've never seen retrievers do this, ma'am. Looks like your husband choked on a turkey bone. I'm sorry for your loss. Hopefully, next year we get to meet before it's cold. End of story. Story number 96. Museum of Death. Sockley Blue. When she woke up, she found herself enclosed in a glass box just big enough for her to stand in. The box was at the center of a studio with 20 or so spectators meandering around the room looking into the other various glass boxes containing other human beings. She cupped her hands against the glass and stuck her face against them and squinted to view the human inside the glass box not far from her. He hung naked from a rope attached to the top of the box, blatantly dead. She looked down and saw a small sign at the bottom of the box and it read, "Death by lynching." Such a magnificent art piece, she heard a spectator viewing the box say. She looked around the room at the other various glass boxes containing humans. One was overrun with rats gnawing on flesh, one cadaver floated in the water, and one was hard to spot from the gas that filled their box. The panic finally setting in, and she began to bang on her glass box. But only one guest looked just to turn away, uninterested. She stopped banging when the spectator walked up to her box and stared at her the way a tourist stares at the Mona Lisa. The spectator looked down at the sign attached to her glass box, and she overheard them say, "Death by starvation." End of story. Story 97. The Life of a Dispatcher. Melody. Written by Blind Dispatcher. When I first became a 911 operator, I thought it was the coolest job. I had always wanted to be a cop, but one thing kept me from doing so. I'm partially blind. I figured if I couldn't help people by protecting them from criminals, I might as well help people in the only other way I could: dispatching. I quickly realized that this job was not for the faint-of-hearted. The hardest calls were the ones that ended abruptly. You would sit there for the rest of the night, or sometimes a full week wondering what happened. In smaller cities, information gets passed around, and dispatchers are usually let in on the end result of the dispatch. But for me, in a city of over 200,000 people, there are so many calls made, there's never enough time to ask the question of what happened. Monday, Friday, and Sundays were the busiest days. The most terrifying and unusual calls were made on those days. Here are some of the more insane phone calls that I've received. For confidentiality reasons, all names have been made up. Melody. 911, what's your emergency? I stayed silent for a good 30 seconds, just listening. Hello, 911, what's your emergency? I repeated. Hi. The voice of a small child whispered through the phone. Hi, sweetie, what's the problem? Mommy and Daddy won't wake up. Okay, I'm sending someone over to your address right now. It'll be about 6 minutes. What's your name? Melody. Is someone coming right now? I'm scared. That's a pretty name. Someone is coming right now. Can you tell me what happened? Why won't Mommy and Daddy wake up? I don't know. Droopy came to visit me and he said he wanted to talk to Mommy. Who's Droopy? I met him in the park. He's a clown. Where's Droopy now? He's playing hide-and-seek with me, but he scares me. Where are you right now, sweetie? Are you hiding from Droopy? Yes, I am, but I saw him with a knife. I'm scared. I could barely hear her. I dispatched the officers again. They were 2 minutes away. Melody, honey, they're almost there. She was breathing heavily into the phone. He's in here, she whispered into the phone, and I could hear the sound of footsteps. Okay, stay where you are and don't make a sound. It's going to be okay, sweetheart. There you are. A voice of a man echoed through the phone, followed by a scream. The phone fell silent. I never found out what happened to Melody and whether the guy was apprehended or not. End of story. Story number 98. The Accident, written by Minboy. It was 1 a.m., and the guy Halverson sat in a dark living room. He hadn't moved in over an hour. The accident earlier that evening kept him playing over and over in his mind. The light turned red, but he was in a hurry and accelerated. An orange blur came from his right, and in a split second there was a violent jolt, and the bicyclist rolled across his hood and fell off the side of the pavement. Horns bled angrily, and he panicked, stepping on the gas and accelerating away from the chaos into the darkness, shaken and keeping an eye on his rearview mirror until he got home. Why did you run, you idiot? He never committed a crime before this and punished himself by imagining years in jail. His career gone, his family gone, his future gone. Why not just go to the police right now? You can afford a lawyer. Then someone tapped on the front door, and his world suddenly crumbled away beneath him. They found me. There was nothing he could do but answer it. Running would only make matters worse. His body trembling, he got up. He went to the door and opened it. A police officer stood under the porch light. "Mr. Halverson?" he asked in a grim voice. He let out the defeated sigh. "Yes, let me. I'm terribly sorry. But I'm afraid I have some bad news. Your son's bike was struck by a hit-and-run driver this evening. He died at the scene. I am very sorry for your loss." End of story. Story number 99. I Never Sleep, written by Foggy Glass Eye. I always told Sarah and our children that I was only afraid of death. Nothing else frightened me, not even the heights or spiders, only the inevitability of one day facing my own mortality. I don't fear it anymore. No, I welcome it. I beg for it, these everlasting, unending moments. There is no rest for me, as I can't sleep. I am forced to stay awake and listen from my resting place, accompanied by the void, by the constant beating of my heart. It is a curse, and I don't know what I did to deserve such a fate. My family can't hear me, because they believe I'm already dead. I hear them when they visit me, though. They treat my resting place like a confessional, sharing their most intimate thoughts and beliefs as though they are speaking to no one at all. But no, I hear them. I have no choice. It's a small gift that, over these long years, these visits have become so less frequent. Sarah was the first to stop visiting. She begged for forgiveness and understanding, and she had finally relented to our children's wishes and moved on from our union. Their stepfather was kind to them, Sarah told me, and they were both on the path to truly seeing him as a father. "I'm sure that you would want me to move forward," she told me, unable to hear my silent protests. "He keeps me safe. He makes me happy." Daggers to my still beating heart. I don't think I wished for death more than I did that day, if only to end my constant suffering. Michael was the second to stop visiting. He admitted to resenting me, to hating me for not being there to teach him how to be a man. He blamed me for his own immaturity. It pained my heart when Renee stopped by recently to hear from my resting place that my daughter walked down the aisles with a stepfather instead of me, that she was expecting her first child in the coming months. She had the audacity to pray that I would be there to watch over my granddaughter, guiding her as she enters the world that I am so desperate to leave. I spit on her prayers. Renee believed in her more candid moments of the confession that she was the only one to care for me after all these years. She saw her more frequent visits at my resting place as a badge of honor. something to brag to her friends about, because it made her a good person. If she wished to honor her father's memory, she would have pulled the plug out years ago. But of course, she insists that I wouldn't want that, which I suppose is my own fault. He was only ever afraid of one thing, she tells the nurses. I know he'll never wake up, but this is what my father wants. End of story. Story number 100. No. Written by Queen Sapphire Blaze. Bring me a bacon, egg and cheese on biscuit with bottled orange juice, Mom said, handing me her card, the sun reflecting off its plastic edges. All right, I said, hopping off the car and heading into the McDonald's. Straight into the mall when you're done. I'll be in Macy's, she called out, waving as she pulled off. Not wanting to interact with anyone, I went into the kiosk and put in my order. Oh, how do you work this damned thing? A gruff voice mumbled, pressing all the buttons, racking up a considerable amount. I looked over at the man, roughly in his early 30s, with curls. I watched him mumble a few more moments before walking over. Would you like some help? I smiled up at him. He looked down at me in surprise and said, Oh yes, please. I'm not used to these machines. He chuckled, flashing his pearly whites. I deleted the extra orders and customized the one he wanted. Thank you very much. He held out a receipt and looked around. He clocked a charm bracelet on my arm. Are you a fan of Gem too? My daughter loves Synergy, he says, presumably talking about the one who was standing next to him. She was about 9, large brown eyes and long cascading hair, wearing purple overalls and a long-sleeved white turtleneck. Although there was summer, her face was dirty with caked-on mud and dust that fell when she turned her head. Yeah, Gem is truly outrageous. I smiled at the girl and waved. She didn't wave back, but stared up at him silently. Typical kid. Maybe she was tired. The dark circles under her eyes were a good sign. I like a lot of older cartoons, but the ones they made now are good too. I shrugged off and began to talk. He was funny and recommended me some cartoons I'd never heard of. Getting our food at roughly the same time, we walked out together, the young girl staying at her father's side. Still not talking. Where you headed? He asked once in the parking lot. Just to the mall. I nodded to the mall. That was maybe 5-minute walk. Oh, I'm heading there. What a ride. He unlocked his Prius, standing next to the driver's door. I thought about it. 5-minute walks was a 30-second drive. The girl finally stopped staring at her father and looked at me straight in the eyes. She shook her head in the slightest bit. No, she mouthed silently, dirt spilling from her mouth over the cracked lips. I'm good. I need the exercise. I laughed nervously. He cocked his head. Yes, sure. It's no trouble for me, really. He took a step forward, placing his McDonald's bag on the roof of his car. Thank you, but I'm okay. Have a good one. I turned down the road and ran. I ran as fast as my legs could take me. End of story. And that, my friends, is the end of the spooky spectacular marathon. I hope you enjoyed. If you wish to support this channel, there are numerous ways to do so down below, but the easiest way would be to share this video with as many people as you can. If you wish to support the authors, the links are down below. And until the next time, I hope that you all have a good one. Cheers.